Negative mirroring is a subtle, often unnoticed psychological tactic that can shake someone's emotional equilibrium without a single word. It works by copying not their warmth or comfort, but their tension, discomfort, and defensiveness. Where traditional mirroring builds connection through shared signals of trust and ease, negative mirroring inverts that. It reflects someone's unease back at them, amplifying their discomfort and silently eroding their confidence. Negative mirroring. The human brain is exquisitely attuned to nonverbal cues. We scan for smiles, slumps, clenched jaws, fidgeting hands. These are not just signals. We absorb and react to them on a visceral level. When someone folds their arms or furrows their brow, and you match it with equal intensity or irritation, something peculiar happens. Their body senses reinforcement. It begins to read its own stress as justified, real, and now mirrored by another. Suddenly, they're not just feeling anxious, they're in a room filled with anxiety. This tactic can unravel someone's internal stability quickly, especially in high-pressure environments. In meetings, a leader who mirrors your crossed arms and curt tone doesn't calm the room. They infect it with tension. In relationships, a partner who reflects your coldness instead of soothing it can escalate a fight without uttering a single hostile word. You find yourself tightening, bristling, unraveling, and not understanding why the energy feels so toxic. Worse still, negative mirroring often disguises itself as coincidence. Most people don't realize it's happening until they're already agitated or doubting themselves. The mimicry feels familiar but dissonant, like seeing your own reflection scowl at you unexpectedly. And that is exactly what makes it so psychologically potent. It taps into our primal fear of being unsafe, unwelcome, and alone. Manipulators use it with precision. In negotiation, it creates stress that breaks down resistance. In power plays, it flips the script, turning your vulnerability into theirs to exploit. They mirror your discomfort, not to join it, but to deepen it. Over time, this leaves you emotionally disoriented, self-questioning, and more likely to defer, appease, or withdraw. What makes negative mirroring so dangerous is its silence. It doesn't scream, it hums beneath the surface. By the time you realize you're mirroring each other's scowl or tension, the emotional damage is already working its way in. Intermittent validation. Intermittent validation is one of the most psychologically intoxicating tactics used to hook someone into emotional dependence. Unlike steady praise or consistent feedback, this technique operates like a slot machine, random, unpredictable, and powerfully addictive. It's the deliberate use of sporadic approval, attention, or affection to keep someone constantly chasing more, never quite knowing when the next reward will come. The human brain is wired for patterns, and when we receive validation inconsistently, it doesn't make us lose interest, it makes us obsess. This is the same psychological mechanism behind gambling addiction. The uncertainty of reward intensifies the craving. You keep pulling the lever because maybe this time you'll get the win. The same happens in relationships and social dynamics when intermittent validation is at play. You become emotionally invested, not because you're always appreciated, but because you're occasionally appreciated, and unpredictably so. At first, it feels thrilling, a sudden compliment, a warm text, a gesture of affection. It lights you up, especially if it follows a period of coldness or withdrawal. The highs feel euphoric because they arrive after silence or distance, but then they vanish. And what follows is the ache, the self-doubt, the quiet questioning. Did I do something wrong? Did I change? Why don't they see me now like they did before? This tactic creates a psychological loop. Reward, withdrawal, insecurity, pursuit. Over time, you begin to seek validation not for the joy of connection, but to relieve the anxiety their inconsistency creates. You stop focusing on whether this person is good for you and start focusing entirely on how to win their attention back. It hijacks your emotional compass. What makes intermittent validation especially cruel is that it feels like love. It mimics passion and interest, but it's actually manipulation dressed as affection. It doesn't nourish, it starves, and then feeds you just enough to keep you hungry. People who use this tactic know exactly what they're doing. They praise when they want control, disappear when they want power, and reappear just enough to keep you craving more. You end up blaming yourself for the inconsistency, not realizing that it's not your fault. It was never about you, it was about the hook. Information starvation. Information starvation is a quiet, calculated form of control that often slips beneath the radar. It's the deliberate act of withholding key details, context, or truths, not out of forgetfulness, but as a way to dominate the emotional and psychological landscape of a relationship or situation. It thrives on imbalance. One person knows, the other doesn't, and that gap, that's where power grows. At first, it may feel like simple forgetfulness or oversight, a missed detail here, a skipped explanation there, but slowly, the pattern emerges. You find yourself always a step behind, confused, uncertain, needing to ask questions just to keep up. And the worst part is, they always have the answers. They just don't give them to you. Not until it benefits them. Not until you've twisted yourself in doubt or dependence. This manipulation works because humans crave clarity. We feel safest when we understand what's going on. When someone denies us information, especially someone we trust, it doesn't just disorient us, it destabilizes our identity. We begin to question our perception, our instincts, even our memory. We shrink into passivity, unsure of what's true, always waiting for them to fill in the blanks they deliberately created. In relationships, this tactic can be soul-draining. They never tell you the full story. They don't mention who they were with, what they meant by that comment, what their real intentions are. You find yourself decoding cryptic messages, rereading texts, looking for meaning where there should have simply been transparency. You start to monitor yourself more than them, careful not to ask too much, not to seem insecure, not to push too hard. In professional environments, information starvation can paralyze performance. A boss withholds context. A colleague keeps resources to themselves. You're left scrambling, second-guessing, underprepared, and they come off as competent or indispensable. They control not through overt dominance, but through selective silence. They don't block you, they starve you and watch you shrink. It's subtle, it's suffocating, and it works because silence can feel less aggressive than lies, yet it erodes trust just as deeply. The manipulation isn't in what's said, but in what's never said, and by the time you realize you're running on scraps, you've already internalized the hunger. Time confusional is a disorienting psychological manipulation that disrupts a person's perception of time to subtly gain power over their emotional and cognitive state. It's not about turning the clock back. It's about bending your sense of when things happen, how long they took, or whether they even occurred in the way you remember. It's a tactic designed to make you doubt your memory, mistrust your instincts, and eventually surrender your sense of reality to the one who controls the narrative. This game is played in moments, not hours. A fight, they say, just happened last week, actually happened a month ago. A promise they insist was never said feels burned into your brain, yet suddenly you're unsure. They'll claim they told you something on a day you know they didn't, or insist a conversation was resolved when it clearly wasn't. Their version of time is just a little off, just enough to make you question your own. It's psychological erosion. Time is how we orient ourselves, how we track change, decisions, and consequences. When someone manipulates time, they're not just shifting dates, they're rewriting the emotional weight of events. If something hurt you deeply, and they tell you it's already been dealt with, already forgiven, already passed, it pressures you to move on before you're ready. If they delay closure or drag out conflict, They keep you suspended in anxiety, unable to heal or act. Time confusional often appears in toxic relationships where control is wielded not through shouting or force, but through narrative distortion. They stretch time when it serves them, making their suffering seem longer, their effort seem greater, and they compress yours, minimizing your pain, your contributions, your memories. This tactic is especially dangerous because it gaslights your sense of emotional continuity. You don't just forget facts, you begin to lose your grip on what felt true. You start to need them to tell you what happened, when it happened, and how it should be interpreted. Your timeline becomes theirs, and in that confusion, they become the anchor. You find yourself asking, was it really that bad? Did that even happen like I remember? And slowly, painfully, your past is no longer your own. Reverse projection. Reverse projection is a psychological sleight of hand, so manipulative, so emotionally disarming, that it can leave even the most self-assured person questioning their own integrity. At its core, it's the act of accusing someone else of the very thing you are secretly doing yourself. It's not a defense, it's an attack, a smokescreen, a way to shift the spotlight of guilt or suspicion away from the perpetrator and onto the unsuspecting victim, who suddenly finds themselves on trial for crimes they didn't commit. Imagine being told you're being dishonest by someone who is actively lying to you, or being called controlling by the person who's been emotionally suffocating you for months. It's jarring, it's confusing, and it works because it throws your sense of justice into chaos. Your instinct is to defend yourself, to disprove the accusation, to explain. But in doing so, you unknowingly step into the trap. You become so focused on clearing your name that you stop looking at theirs. The brilliance of reverse projection lies in its timing. It's often used when someone feels exposed, when their behavior is at risk of being noticed, questioned, or held accountable. Rather than face scrutiny, they launch a preemptive strike. They turn your attention inward. They accuse you with such conviction, such emotion, that you start wondering, could I really be the problem? This tactic is especially potent in close relationships. It feels personal, intimate, because the accusations aren't wild. They're crafted from your vulnerabilities. They'll say you're hiding things, knowing they are the one being deceptive. They'll accuse you of manipulation right after carefully pushing your buttons. They know exactly how to frame it, so you question your truth and doubt your memory. What makes reverse projection so cruel is that it takes your desire to be good, to be accountable, and weaponizes it against you. The more emotionally mature you are, the more likely you are to internalize the accusation, to reflect, to apologize, and while you're caught in that spiral, they walk away clean, guilt-free, and seemingly righteous. By the time you realize the accusations were never about you, you've already lost the upper hand. You've already accepted their reality as more valid than your own. Strategic vagueness. Strategic vagueness is the art of weaponizing ambiguity. It's not forgetfulness, and it's not poor communication. It's precision disguised as confusion. This tactic is about saying just enough to be heard, but never enough to be held accountable. It's deliberate, calculated, and designed to create a fog of uncertainty that protects the speaker while destabilizing the listener. When someone uses strategic vagueness, they dance around commitments. They say things like, "I'll try," "We'll see," or "That's not exactly what I meant." They hint instead of declare, suggest instead of state, imply instead of confirm. And while it may seem harmless on the surface, the emotional impact is anything but. It places all the weight of interpretation on you, forcing you to fill in the gaps, absorb the consequences, and carry the confusion. This manipulation thrives in relationships, workplaces, and negotiations where accountability is threatening. A partner promises change soon, but never defines when. A boss outlines expectations vaguely, only to reprimand you for failing to meet standards that were never actually said aloud. A friend hurts you with a comment, but when confronted responds, "I didn't say that. You must have taken it the wrong way." You're left holding emotions they won't validate, chasing clarity they'll never give. Strategic vagueness is especially dangerous because it creates a mirage of communication. It feels like someone has spoken clearly, but when you reach for their words, they crumble. And if you challenge them, they retreat into denial. "That's not what I meant. You're overreacting. You're putting words in my mouth." Suddenly, you become the problem, not their lack of honesty. It's a masterstroke of psychological evasion. They never commit fully, so they can't be blamed fully. They keep you just close enough to stay engaged, but never close enough to feel secure. You're always wondering, always asking, always trying to read between the lines that they intentionally left blank. And here's the cruel twist. If you call them out on being vague, they'll often turn it back on you, accuse you of twisting their words, of being too sensitive, of looking for drama, all while they continue speaking in riddles, watching you try to decode meaning in what was never meant to be clear. They don't want to be understood. They want to be unaccountable. Expectation baiting. Expectation baiting is a deeply manipulative tactic where someone intentionally sets an unrealistically high standard, not to meet it, but to weaponize it later. It's the emotional con. They create a grand gesture, a golden moment, a promise of extraordinary consistency, kindness, or support, just once. And that single act becomes the yardstick by which you are forever measured and guilted, not because they intend to repeat it, but because they expect you to live up to it, repay it, and feel indebted when you fall short. It begins with what feels like a gift, a surprise trip, a sudden act of selflessness, an overwhelming display of care. You're taken aback, in a good way. It seems like love, like generosity, like effort, but then it doesn't happen again, not in the same way, not even close. You wait, you hope, you try to reciprocate, but what follows instead is subtle emotional bookkeeping. They start to reference that one moment, that thing they did, that expectation they set, not for themselves, but for you. And when you can't or won't match it, they turn it against you. "After everything I did for you, I never saw you do something like that for me." Suddenly, you're the one who is ungrateful, cold, selfish. Even if you've shown up 100 times in smaller, more consistent ways, their single strategic act eclipses all of it. The standard wasn't built to last. It was bait, emotional bait. This technique is particularly devastating because it exploits our natural instinct toward fairness. You want to be a good partner, a good friend, a decent human being. So when someone accuses you of not living up to a standard, especially one they themselves created, you feel shame. You feel like you failed. But the truth is, you were set up to fail. The bar was never meant to be met, not even by them. Expectation baiting thrives on guilt. It creates emotional debt where there should have been connection. It shifts the dynamic from mutual care to transactional obligation, and it leaves you constantly proving yourself to someone who already decided they wouldn't match your effort, only measure it and use it against you. False dilemma trap. The false dilemma trap is a masterclass in manipulation disguised as logic. It's the psychological sleight of hand where someone presents you with two stark, often undesirable choices, forcing you to pick between them, while quietly guiding you toward a third option they've crafted to look like salvation. It's not about giving you freedom to choose. It's about boxing you into a decision that feels like escape, but is actually surrender. This tactic hijacks our need for clarity. When humans feel cornered, when pressure is high and emotions are raw, we don't always ask, "Is there another way?" We ask, "What's the lesser evil?" And that's exactly the window a manipulator slips through. They say, either you accept this deal and compromise everything you care about, or you walk away with nothing. Then they present an alternative. Or maybe just this one reasonable solution in the middle, but that reasonable path, that was their goal all along. The extremes were just illusions, props, in a carefully constructed stage. You weren't given a choice. You were herded. It happens in relationships where someone says, either you forgive me completely or we end this forever. It happens in jobs where the message is either accept the extra workload or risk being seen as uncommitted. It happens in politics, sales, families, anywhere someone wants control without appearing coercive. And the genius of the false dilemma is that it disguises control as compromise. You end up agreeing, not because it was right, but because it was better than the threat. You say yes out of fear, not out of freedom. And later, when the fog lifts, you wonder how you got there, why you accepted so little, why you felt so relieved just to avoid disaster, even if what you settle for still hurt. The emotional trap here is urgency. The manipulator creates pressure, stakes, panic. They make it feel like you have to decide now. That hesitation means catastrophe. And when your mind narrows under fear, you don't see the door behind you. You only see the two walls in front of you. You never realize the third option wasn't compromise. It was entrapment, dressed as mercy. Cognitive flooding. Cognitive flooding is a psychological overwhelm tactic designed to shut down your ability to think critically by burying you in a tidal wave of information, arguments, and rapid-fire logic. It's not meant to inform you. It's meant to drown you. The goal is disorientation, paralysis, to make you so mentally saturated that you stop questioning, stop analyzing, and simply submit. This manipulation often masquerades as intelligence or assertiveness. The person employing it will talk fast, switch topics, cite studies you've never heard of, reference conversations you don't remember, and bombard you with what seems like irrefutable logic. It doesn't matter if it's relevant. It doesn't even matter if it's true. What matters is volume, speed, momentum. They keep talking so you can't think. They keep pushing so you can't breathe. And while your brain scrambles to catch up, they're already 5 points ahead, building a narrative that feels unchallengeable simply because it's so overwhelming. In emotionally charged situations, this is especially brutal. A partner defending their betrayal might launch into a barrage of justifications, accusations, and whataboutisms so quickly that you lose your grip on what the actual issue was. By the time they're done, you're apologizing. You're agreeing to things you didn't understand. You're nodding, just to end the chaos in your mind. Cognitive flooding hijacks your mental bandwidth. The human brain can only hold so much at once. When someone throws more at you than you can process, especially under stress, your survival brain takes over. Fight or flight kicks in, reason shuts down. And in that mental fog, the manipulator takes control. You lose clarity, and they gain compliance. It's used by abusers, interrogators, toxic bosses, cult leaders, anyone who benefits from submission. Because a flooded mind is not a free mind. It's too tired to resist, too confused to say no, too anxious to assert its own truth. And what's chilling is how subtle it can be. A debate that spirals, a lecture that leaves you dizzy, a conversation that leaves you feeling stupid or small. It wasn't a discussion. It was a takeover, not of your opinion, of your capacity to hold one. Identity provocation. Identity provocation is one of the most insidious forms of psychological manipulation because it targets the deepest part of who you are, your sense of self. It's not about attacking your opinions or actions directly. It's about poking holes in your identity, pressing on the parts you define yourself by until they start to fracture. It's subtle, it's intimate, and it can make even the most confident person feel suddenly, terrifyingly unsure. The game begins with small, cutting remarks, never loud, never overt. You used to be more ambitious. That's not like you. Wow, I didn't think you would act that way. These aren't just criticisms. They're crafted to sound like reflections of you, as if the speaker knows you better than you know yourself. And when you hear them, something inside you flinches. You start to wonder, am I really who I think I am? That's the point. We all have core identities we cling to: loyal, strong, creative, nurturing, principled. Identity provocation weaponizes those labels. It suggests that maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Maybe you're selfish, lazy, fake, cold. And the moment you begin to doubt, the manipulator tightens their grip. They offer their own version of who you are, and it's almost always less. In romantic relationships, this often shows up as, "You're not as kind as you pretend to be," or "I thought you were the mature one." In families, it becomes, "You've changed. You're not the person we raised." At work, it can be framed as, "I expected more from someone like you." Each statement is a scalpel, not a hammer, slicing at your identity with surgical precision until you feel destabilized enough to chase their approval just to feel whole again. The terrifying effectiveness of identity provocation lies in its ability to make the victim complicit. You begin trying to prove yourself, not because you did something wrong, but because someone made you believe you're no longer good enough. You become desperate to reclaim the self-image they've quietly taken from you. And all the while, the manipulator watches as you unravel, powerless, confused, and clinging to a version of yourself you no longer fully trust. Urgency Mirage. Urgency. Mirage is a high-pressure psychological tactic that simulates a ticking clock where none exists. It's the illusion of limited time, a manufactured sense of now or never, designed to override your rational mind and push you into a decision before you've had the chance to truly think. The person using it doesn't want your clarity. They want your compliance, and they know the fastest way to get it is to make you feel like you're already out of time. This manipulation hijacks one of your deepest survival instincts, the fear of loss. When urgency is in the air, your brain doesn't evaluate. It reacts. It bypasses logic and scrambles to secure what's being threatened: the deal, the opportunity, the relationship, the approval. But the urgency isn't real. It's a mirage, strategically placed to blur your vision and steer you where they want you to go. It shows up in moments that seem exciting but feel vaguely uncomfortable. You have to decide tonight. This price only lasts for the next hour. If you don't respond now, I'll take it as a no. Whether it's a salesperson pushing a limited offer, a manipulative partner issuing ultimatums, or a friend demanding instant loyalty, the goal is the same: corner you emotionally and cognitively. Because when you feel trapped by time, you're more likely to betray your own boundaries just to escape the pressure. What makes the urgency mirage so dangerous is its speed. You don't have time to consult your intuition, to ask questions, to weigh options. You rush, you say yes, and later, when the fog lifts, you realize you never would have agreed if you'd had the space to breathe. This tactic thrives on anxiety. The more you feel like you're missing out, the more you fear disappointing someone, the easier it is to manipulate you. It's not just about forcing your hand, it's about severing your access to calm decision-making. And once that's gone, you're not choosing, you're surviving. They want your reaction, not your reflection, your impulse, not your insight. Because the second you realize you actually had time, you'll see through the illusion, and they'll lose the control they never deserve to have. Perception anchoring. Perception anchoring is a psychological manipulation that quietly takes control of your judgment by distorting your sense of scale. It doesn't force your hand, it shifts your frame of reference. The trick is simple: present something extreme first, an outrageous price, a shocking idea, a dramatic request, and then follow it with what the manipulator really wants. The second option suddenly feels reasonable, but it isn't. It only feels that way because your mind has been anchored to the extreme. This tactic doesn't just work, it rewires your perception. Human brains aren't designed to evaluate things in isolation. We compare, we contrast, we calibrate. Anchoring hijacks that process. If you walk into a store and see a jacket priced at $800, then turn and find one for $300, your brain doesn't ask, is this jacket worth $300? It says, wow, what a deal compared to the first one. You've been anchored, and that $300 was the real target all along. In emotional and social dynamics, perception anchoring becomes even more dangerous. In a relationship, someone may start by treating you with overt disrespect or distance, then ease into mild neglect. And suddenly, that neglect feels like affection. In negotiation, a boss may demand unreasonable hours or responsibilities, only to settle for slightly less. You end up accepting terms you would have rejected instantly had they not been compared to something worse. This is the brilliance and cruelty of the trap. The manipulator doesn't need you to love the final option. They just need it to feel better than the first. And once your mind adjusts, you stop thinking critically. You're not asking, is this healthy? Is this fair? You're thinking, well, at least it's not as bad as it could have been. That's how people settle. That's how they stay. That's how they surrender, thinking they're being smart or reasonable. It's not just about influence. It's about ownership of your reality. Once someone controls your point of comparison, they control your expectations, your standards, even your self-worth. You begin to accept less because they made worse look normal first. And by the time you realize you've been anchored, you've already sunk. Covert exclusion. Covert exclusion is a quiet cruelty, a psychological tactic that doesn't scream or confront, but whispers through silence and absence. It's the act of deliberately leaving someone out in a way that feels just subtle enough to be deniable, but just obvious enough to hurt. The goal isn't open conflict, it's erosion, not to attack your self-esteem head-on, but to slowly chip away at it until you begin to wonder if you even belong. Unlike overt exclusion, which is easy to recognize and name, covert exclusion disguises itself as coincidence or forgetfulness. They accidentally forget to invite you. They didn't think you'd be interested. The group chat was made after plans were already set. You're always finding out after the fact. About the party, the meeting, the inside joke, the secret someone shared with everyone but you. And each time, it stings. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. Because no one says it to your face, but you feel it in your bones. This tactic is particularly devastating because it strikes at the core of human psychology, our need to belong. Social exclusion, even in small doses, activates the same brain regions as physical pain. We're wired to detect it, to panic at the edge of connection. When someone uses covert exclusion, they exploit that wiring. They keep you close enough to see the circle, but always just outside it. It's often used in toxic social dynamics, a friend group where one person becomes the silent target, a workplace where information flows in closed loops, a family where decisions are made without your input, then presented as final. It's never direct. It's never brutal. That's what makes it so effective. You start to question your worth. Are you too sensitive? Too needy? Are you imagining it? You're not. That hollow feeling in your chest, that subtle but sharp sense of being othered, is real. And the worst part? The person excluding you may still smile in your face, still call you a friend, still act like nothing's wrong. But behind that mask is a message. You don't matter as much as you thought. And over time, that message sinks in, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, deeply. Token listening is one of the most deceptive and emotionally corrosive mind games because it wears the mask of empathy while silently sharpening a knife. It's the act of pretending to listen, not to understand, not to connect, but to collect. Every word you say becomes currency for someone else's agenda. They nod, they maintain eye contact, they say, I hear you, but they're not hearing to help. They're hearing to hold it against you. Later, when it's most painful, the manipulation begins quietly. You speak vulnerably, thinking you're in a safe space. You open up about fears, frustrations, mistakes, believing you're being met with care. But what you don't see is the mental filing cabinet being filled behind the facade. They're storing your words, not to validate you, but to use them as future ammunition. Token listeners thrive in moments of intimacy. They know trust isn't taken, it's offered, so they let you offer it freely, and you feel seen for a while. But what comes next is a betrayal so subtle it doesn't cut until it's too late. Days or weeks later, when you're in conflict or under pressure, your own words are thrown back at you, not with love, but with precision. Didn't you say you were insecure about that? You told me you struggle with this, so don't act surprised. Remember when you admitted you always mess things up? It feels like being emotionally mugged with the very feelings you thought were safe, and you're left confused, ashamed, exposed. The person who once nodded with warmth now weaponizes your honesty with chilling calm. It's emotional blackmail in slow motion. In relationships, token listening can make you feel like you're being heard until you realize you're being recorded. In workplaces, it shows up as leaders who ask for feedback, only to use your words against you in performance reviews. In friendships, it's the confidant who listens silently, only to gossip or retaliate later. What makes token listening so devastating is its intimacy. You gave them the map to your heart. They smiled as you handed it over. Then they folded it into a knife. And when the blade twists, you don't just feel betrayed. You feel stupid for ever believing they truly listened. Emotional pacing. Emotional pacing is one of the most deceptively powerful forms of influence. It doesn't command, demand, or push. It guides, quietly. It starts by aligning with someone's emotional state, mirroring their energy, their mood, their tone, until they feel seen, felt, and safe. And just when the connection is strong enough, the manipulator leads them somewhere else, not toward truth, not toward clarity, but toward a decision they wouldn't have made on their own. This technique thrives on empathy, but twisted into manipulation. The person using emotional pacing doesn't deny your feelings. They validate them. At first, if you're angry, they're angry too. If you're hurt, they nod in deep understanding. They match your emotional rhythm perfectly, syncing their responses so seamlessly that you feel an almost immediate bond. Finally, you think, someone who gets it. But that's the trap. The alignment isn't real. It's strategic. Because once you let your guard down, they begin to shift the emotional current, subtly. If you were outraged, they'll start calming you. If you were doubtful, they'll feed your hope. If you were firm in your boundary, they'll gently coax it into softness. You don't notice the shift because it feels natural, like you just talked yourself into it, but you didn't. You were led. Emotional pacing is used in negotiations, relationships, therapy, gone wrong, even cult indoctrination. Anywhere someone benefits from your emotional compliance, this tactic becomes a tool, because people don't make decisions based on logic alone. They make them based on emotion. Shift the emotion, and you shift the choice. What makes this tactic so dangerous is its invisibility. Unlike overt coercion, emotional pacing feels good. It feels warm, connective, intimate. You're not being pushed, you're being understood. But that feeling of being understood is precisely what makes you vulnerable, because once someone has matched your internal world, they gain the power to reshape it. And when it's over, when you realize you agreed to something you never would have under your own emotional clarity, it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like your decision. That's what hurts the most. You weren't forced, you were guided, gently, persuasively, and you never saw the turn until you were already miles from yourself. Contrarian disagreement. Contrarian disagreement is not about truth. It's not even about opinion. It's a psychological power move, a strategy of constant opposition meant to destabilize, dominate, and elevate the speaker by tearing others down. It's the reflexive habit of saying no, of challenging, correcting, questioning, not because something is wrong, but because it feeds the illusion of superiority. The goal is simple: make you second-guess yourself and make them look like the smartest person in the room. This isn't a passionate debate. It's not the fire of genuine discourse. It's colder, more calculated. You say the sky is blue, they remind you it's actually a spectrum. You offer a solution, they highlight every possible flaw without offering one of their own. You share excitement about an idea, and they scoff. That's been done before. It's a slow erosion of confidence, masked as intelligence. Contrarian disagreeers are often charismatic, articulate, sharp. They present their opposition like insight, as if they're helping you see what you missed. But over time, their pattern becomes unmistakable. They only feel powerful when they are one step above you. So, they disagree to rise. And each time you yield or hesitate, they climb a little higher in the social hierarchy they've built in their head. In relationships, this dynamic is toxic. You may find yourself walking on intellectual eggshells, thinking, how will they flip this? What angle will they twist this from now? You begin editing yourself, playing small, questioning your ideas before they even do. And that's the victory they crave. Not a better idea, but your silent retreat. It shows up in workplaces too. Someone who always plays devil's advocate, not for clarity, but for control. They offer opposition for opposition's sake, planting doubt, positioning themselves as the lone critical thinker, when in reality, they're just afraid of being equal to the group. Equal doesn't make them feel safe. Superior does. And here's the most maddening part. When you call them out, they say, I'm just being honest. Don't you want someone who challenges you? As if their pushback is a gift, as if the exhaustion they cause is something you should thank them for. But it's not honesty, it's ego. It's dominance wrapped in dialogue. Premature disclosure. Premature disclosure is the calculated use of vulnerability to fast-track intimacy, but not for connection, for control. It's when someone shares personal, emotional, or even traumatic information far too early in a relationship, not because they trust you, but because they want you to trust them. It's not about being open, it's about setting a trap disguised as honesty. In healthy relationships, vulnerability builds slowly. It emerges through time, safety, and mutual care. But when someone engages in premature disclosure, they break that rhythm on purpose. They tell you about their painful childhood, their past heartbreak, their anxiety, their secrets, all within the first few hours, days, or interactions. It feels intense, disarming. It pulls you in. You feel special, chosen, like you've been given a backstage pass to someone's soul. But what's really happening is psychological manipulation. Because the moment someone opens up like that, your instinct, especially if you're empathetic, is to match it, to share back, to reveal something equally personal. And just like that, the balance shifts. You're exposed. You've crossed boundaries you didn't even know were there. And now they know how to reach you, how to hook you, how to hold you. This tactic works because it feels like trust. But trust isn't what's being built. It's dependency. Suddenly, you feel responsible for their emotions. You start comforting, supporting, caretaking. You excuse red flags because they've been through so much. You overlook inconsistencies because they opened up to you. The truth is, they gave you a story, not because it hurt, but because it works. Premature disclosure is often used by narcissists, abusers, and emotional manipulators who want closeness without accountability. It's the love bomber's favorite tool: drown you in depth before you even know who they really are. And if you ever pull away, they'll use your shared secrets against you. Or worse, they'll accuse you of being cold, uncaring, after everything they told you. It's not vulnerability. It's a performance designed to speed past your defenses. And once it works, they'll expect your loyalty, your sympathy, your silence, long before they've ever earned your trust. Behavioral breadcrumbs. Behavioral breadcrumbs are the cruelest form of emotional bait. They are the tiny, deliberate hints of affection, interest, or attention left just often enough to keep someone hoping, but never enough to truly commit, connect, or care. It's manipulation by minimalism, a heart game of almost, where the manipulator offers just enough to keep you invested, but not enough to give you clarity, peace, or closure. They don't say they love you, but they like every photo. They don't reach out for days, but suddenly reply with a laughing emoji. They cancel plans, but follow up with a casual, "missed you." It's never direct, never consistent, but it's just enough to reignite your hope, and that hope becomes the leash. Breadcrumbing isn't about love, it's about power. It gives the illusion of possibility without the weight of responsibility. The person dropping the crumbs doesn't want you to go away. They want you to stay waiting. They want the reassurance of your attention, the ego boost of your desire, the safety of your loyalty, without ever having to offer anything real in return. This tactic is devastating because it feels like something is almost happening, like you're on the edge of something meaningful. If only you wait a little longer, try a little harder, become a little more, but nothing ever comes. And still, each crumb, each text, each compliment, each fleeting moment of warmth feels like progress. Your mind starts spinning stories to fill the silence. Maybe they're just busy, maybe they're scared, maybe they're waiting for the right time. But they're not waiting. They're in control. They know exactly how much to give. They've learned how little it takes to keep you hooked. You stop asking for more because you're afraid of scaring them off. You stop expecting clarity because you've settled for fragments. You don't walk away because what if this next message means more? What if this time is different? It won't be. Breadcrumbs aren't love. They're a slow, soft form of manipulation. They keep you emotionally tethered, not through intimacy, but through hunger. And by the time you realize you've been surviving off scraps, you've already forgotten what being full felt like. Strategic incompetence. Strategic incompetence is not a lack of ability. It's the weaponization of pretending to lack ability. It's when someone deliberately performs poorly, acts confused, or exaggerates their inability just enough to be convincing, all to dodge responsibility, shift burdens, or control outcomes without ever having to say no. It's not laziness, it's calculation, a quiet manipulation that plays dumb to stay in power. You've probably seen it in action. The partner who can't do the laundry correctly, so you stop asking. The coworker who always messes up reports, so you do them instead. The friend who's bad at emotional stuff, so they never have to support you. At first, it seems innocent, maybe even a little funny, but over time, a pattern emerges. The tasks they conveniently fail at are always the ones they don't want to do. And the fallout? That lands squarely on you. What makes strategic incompetence so insidious is that it's hard to confront. If you push back, you risk seeming insensitive. "I really am trying," they'll insist. "I just can't do it like you can." You're painted as the perfectionist, the nag, the unreasonably demanding one. So you give in, you take over, you make it easier for both of you, but at your own expense, and they know it. This tactic is especially common in domestic and workplace dynamics where unbalanced emotional labor thrives. It creates a system where one person is overloaded and the other conveniently useless. But it's not incapacity, it's power in disguise, because the more you take on, the more control they gain. You become the fixer, the doer, the one they couldn't live without, and yet they never quite rise to meet you. Strategic incompetence isn't about effort, it's about outcomes, and the outcome is always the same. They get what they want without having to take responsibility for it. It's a refusal to grow masked as helplessness, a soft manipulation that makes you the villain for expecting accountability. And by the time you realize you've been carrying both your weight and theirs, you're exhausted, resentful, but still the only one getting things done. Intentional amnesia. Intentional amnesia is a chilling form of psychological manipulation where someone pretends to forget things, not because they can't remember, but because remembering would mean taking responsibility. It's not forgetfulness, it's evasion disguised as absent-mindedness. It's the careful erasure of anything that might hold them accountable, make them uncomfortable, or expose the truth of what they did, said, or promised. They forget the things that hurt you. They forget the agreements they made, the boundaries they crossed, the apologies they owe. They forget entire conversations that shook you to your core, but somehow they remember the things that benefit them perfectly. They remember your mistakes, your slip-ups, your exact words when you got emotional. Their memory becomes selective, sharp when it serves them, foggy when it doesn't. This manipulation works because memory is sacred. We assume forgetfulness is innocent, human. So when someone says, "I don't remember saying that," or "I honestly forgot that happened," we give them grace. We doubt ourselves instead. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it really wasn't a big deal. And just like that, the pain you carried becomes invalidated, minimized, erased. Intentional amnesia is gaslighting's quiet cousin. It doesn't argue your reality. It simply pretends it never existed. And when used consistently, it forces you into the exhausting position of having to prove what you remember, to justify your feelings, to dig up texts, retrace conversations, repeat yourself again and again just to be heard. It shows up in relationships where someone repeatedly crosses lines and then acts baffled when you call them out. Did I say that? Are you sure? I don't remember it that way. It shows up in toxic workplaces when a manager forgets the promises they made about your role, your raise, your boundaries. It shows up in families when someone conveniently forgets their cruelty but clings to your reactions like trophies. And here's the part that hurts the most. When you realize they never forgot, they chose not to remember, because remembering would mean facing what they've done. So they drop the past like dead weight while you're still dragging it behind you, begging them to see it. But they won't. Not because they can't, because they won't. Rescue sabotage. Rescue sabotage is a deeply manipulative, psychological tactic in which someone deliberately creates chaos, confusion, or distress, only to step in and heroically fix it. They light the fire, then show up with the hose. They break the thing, then play the savior who puts it back together. It's not about helping you. It's about being needed, about controlling the story so they always come out looking indispensable. This tactic thrives in relationships where dependency is mistaken for love. The person using it needs to be the one who saves the day, but only after they have darkened it. They might stir drama between friends, then position themselves as the peacemaker. They might withhold key information at work, then swoop in at the last minute with a solution. Or worse, they'll emotionally destabilize you, pulling away, confusing you, creating conflict, only to return with comfort and support, as if they were never the source of the pain in the first place. It's psychological poisoning followed by emotional first aid, and it works because humans are wired to bond through crisis. When someone rescues you from something painful, even if they caused it, you feel gratitude, relief, connection. You remember the save, not the sabotage. You see them as the protector, the fixer, the one who shows up when things go wrong, and so you trust them, even when, deep down, something doesn't feel right. The truth is, rescue sabotage is not love. It's control disguised as care. It's manipulation wearing the mask of devotion. They manufacture the problem to control the outcome, to write the script where they are always the hero and you are always the one in need. Because if you need them, you won't leave. If you see them as your rescuer, you won't question how the pain began. This tactic slowly erodes your self-confidence. You begin to feel incapable, unstable, like things only work when they're around. But it's not that you're weak. It's that they've built a cycle that ensures your struggle just so they can star in your recovery. It's not generosity, it's a game, one where they get to be both the storm and the shelter. Ghost gaslighting. Ghost gaslighting is a sinister twist on psychological manipulation, a mind game where someone insists you said or did something that never actually happened. It's not just rewriting the past, it's writing in ghosts, memories that were never yours, moments that never existed, and they don't scream it. They whisper it with calm conviction. You said that. I remember you doing that. Don't pretend you forgot. And suddenly, your grip on reality begins to slip. This isn't the usual miscommunication. This is deliberate distortion. You know you never said that. You know, but they speak with such certainty, such seriousness, that doubt creeps in anyway. You retrace your thoughts. You search your memory. You feel that quiet panic rise. Am I losing it? Am I misremembering? Am I really that unaware of myself? That doubt is exactly the weapon they want you to pick up and turn inward. Ghost gaslighting doesn't just confuse, it replaces. It implants fake memories into your emotional archive. And the worst part is, it's not chaotic or loud. It's subtle, surgical. It often happens in calm tones, at the end of long conversations, or in the heat of conflict, where emotions already blur facts. They'll say, you said you didn't care, or last week you told me to do this. And when you deny it, they double down, not with proof, but with confidence. That confidence is what breaks you. In relationships, ghost gaslighting can make you feel like a stranger to your own words. In arguments, they rewrite what you supposedly said to justify their behavior. In manipulation, it's used to paint you as inconsistent, unstable, or even dishonest. Over time, you begin to second-guess your voice. You stop trusting your instincts. You become quieter, not because you have less to say, but because you're afraid of what they'll say you said. And when you try to fight back, they make it seem like you are the one rewriting things. Why are you always so dramatic? You really have memory problems. You never take responsibility. They don't just insert lies. They flip your reality upside down, then blame you for being dizzy. Ghost gaslighting doesn't just make you question what's real, it makes you question yourself. And once you're unsure of your own truth, they don't need to control you, because you'll start doing it for them. Triangulation. Triangulation is a psychological power play that turns communication into a weapon by dragging a third party into a conflict or relationship, not to help resolve it, but to manipulate it. It's when someone doesn't speak to you directly, but about you, through someone else. They pit people against each other, create subtle rivalries, and plant seeds of insecurity, all while standing safely at the center, pulling the strings. It starts quietly. Maybe they tell you what someone else really thinks about you. Maybe they mention how another person handles things better than you do, or maybe they run to a mutual friend to vent about you, ensuring that message makes its way back. On the surface, it might look like gossip, or concern, or innocent chatter, but underneath, something darker is at play. Control through division. Triangulation feeds off insecurity. The manipulator makes you feel compared, replaced, or judged, not directly, but through the presence of that third person. You're not just dealing with them, you're suddenly competing with someone else, being measured against someone you didn't ask to be part of the conversation, and that's the point. The focus shifts. The emotional power is redistributed. You start reacting to them, but through the lens of someone else. In romantic relationships, triangulation often looks like flirting with someone else just enough to provoke jealousy. In friendships, it's dropping comments like, well, Sarah agrees with me, or at least Mike doesn't overreact like you do. In families, it can be devastating. A parent comparing siblings to control behavior, a child playing one parent against the other to get what they want. It turns connection into a battleground. The manipulator stays calm, collected, above it all, while the people they triangulate scramble to compete, prove, or repair. They rarely take responsibility because they're just the messenger, just being honest, just trying to help. But what they're really doing is fragmenting trust, quietly making sure no one talks to each other, only about each other. And the result? Everyone starts to doubt everyone else, while the triangulator stands in the middle, feeding the tension, enjoying the control, and never getting their hands dirty. Phantom standards. Phantom standards are invisible rules, unspoken expectations that constantly shift, leaving you chasing approval you'll never fully earn. They're not written down, they're not agreed upon, but you're judged by them anyway. You don't even realize you're being tested until you've already failed. And the worst part? The rules keep changing, just out of reach, making you feel like the problem is always you. It starts subtly. You try to be supportive, thoughtful, attentive. You think you're doing well, maybe even excelling. But then comes the sigh, the coldness, the comment laced with disappointment. You should have known. I shouldn't have to ask. This isn't what I expected. And you scramble to understand. What was the rule? What did I miss? You ask for clarity. They refuse to give it. They expect you to just get it, to read between the lines, to anticipate their moods, their needs, their boundaries, without ever being told what they are. And when you try, when you stretch yourself thin, trying to meet what you think they want, the target moves again. What was good enough last week is now a disappointment. What was once praised is now met with silence. This game is psychological exhaustion. It erodes your self-confidence by replacing fairness with uncertainty. You begin walking on emotional eggshells, second-guessing every choice, every word. You become hyper-aware, hyper-vigilant, watching their tone, their pauses, their silence, trying to decode what they won't say outright. Phantom standards are control in its most covert form. The manipulator gets to play both the rule maker and the judge. While you are stuck in a game you didn't agree to play, you're never rewarded, only reminded of what you should have done better. And over time, you stop asking, is this fair? And start asking, what's wrong with me? In relationships, it feels like never being good enough. In families, it becomes generational guilt. In work environments, it looks like impossible to meet expectations and vague performance metrics. And always the effect is the same. You feel small, uncertain, powerless. Phantom standards don't just set you up to fail, they make you believe that the failure is proof that you don't deserve to win. Progress sabotage. Progress sabotage is a slow, quiet erosion of someone's growth, masked as concern, cloaked in subtlety, and often delivered with a smile. It's not open sabotage. It doesn't come in the form of outright rejection or overt opposition. Instead, it slips in through delayed encouragement, faint praise, small distractions, and carefully timed doubts. It's the hidden hand that gently pulls you back, just as you're beginning to rise. The person doing it often appears supportive on the surface. They ask about your plans, your goals, your dreams, but then they question the timing. They remind you of your past failures. They suggest maybe you're rushing, reaching too far, aiming too high. I'm just being realistic, they say. I don't want you to get hurt. And just like that, a seed of doubt is planted where confidence once stood. You don't notice it right away because it doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like care, like protection. But over time, you start to feel smaller around them. You second-guess your ideas. You hold back from sharing wins. You feel guilty for wanting more. And that guilt is exactly what they want. Because if you stay unsure of yourself, if you stay a little bit stuck, they get to stay one step ahead, one step in control. This tactic is especially dangerous when it comes from someone close, someone you trust, a partner who gets irritated every time you make progress, a friend who never quite celebrates your success, a parent who insists they know what's best for you, even if it means abandoning your dreams. They don't stop you outright. They just stall you, distract you, undermine you with small gestures that seem harmless but add up over time. And it's in those moments when you delay applying for the job, drop the idea, or decide now's not the right time, that the sabotage works. You internalize their hesitation as your own. You believe the doubt. You shrink, just a little, to fit the comfort of their approval. Progress sabotage doesn't tear you down all at once. It convinces you to do it yourself, slowly, quietly, until you no longer recognize how far you could have gone if they hadn't whispered that maybe, just maybe, you were better off staying still. Conditional affection. Conditional affection is love with a leash. It's the kind of affection that looks warm, sounds sweet, and feels real, until you realize it only shows up when you perform. It's not given freely. It's earned, traded, withheld, weaponized. And the message underneath it is devastatingly clear. You are only lovable when you behave how I want you to. At first, it might seem like care, praise when you achieve something, smiles when you comply, tenderness when you suppress your needs to prioritize theirs. You feel appreciated, valued, even, but only sometimes, because the moment you step out of line, speak too loudly, cry too much, need too deeply, the warmth vanishes, the affection freezes, the silence becomes punishment. Suddenly, you're left chasing approval you thought you already had. This form of manipulation strikes at the heart of human vulnerability. We are wired to seek connection, to interpret approval as safety. Conditional affection exploits that need by tying it to compliance. It turns love into a behavioral reward system. Be good and you get fed. Push back and the love disappears. In childhood, this can shape a lifetime of insecurity. When a parent only shows love when a child succeeds, behaves, or stays quiet, that child grows up believing they must earn love through perfection. In relationships, it looks like a partner who goes cold the moment you express needs, anger, or individuality. It looks like, I love you when you're easy, and it feels like walking a tightrope every day. The cruelest part of conditional affection is how deeply it trains self-abandonment. You learn to suppress your instincts, desires, and voice just to keep the connection alive. You become so focused on being who they want, you forget who you are, and when the approval comes again, it's euphoric, not because it's pure, but because it relieves the ache of emotional starvation. People who use conditional affection aren't always conscious of it, but the damage is the same. You're left anxious, confused, and stuck in a loop of trying harder and receiving less. You become addicted to crumbs, convinced if you just say the right thing, act the right way, love them better, they'll finally love you freely. But they won't, because their love was never free to begin with. Insecurity Cultivation. Insecurity cultivation is the intentional nurturing of someone's self-doubt, not to help them grow, but to keep them small, unsure, and emotionally dependent. It's the art of weakening a person's sense of self just enough that they no longer trust their own judgment, voice, or value, so they start looking to you for all three. It doesn't scream abuse. It whispers concern. It hides behind backhanded compliments, subtle comparisons, and words that sting just softly enough to feel like truth. The person using this tactic doesn't insult you outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, they shape the way you see yourself with gentle erosion. They might praise others in ways they never praise you. She really knows how to handle things. They might question your choices constantly. Are you sure that's what you want to wear? They might point out your flaws, but only to help. I just don't want people judging you. Over time, these small comments chip away at your confidence like slow acid, dissolving your ability to stand tall. What makes insecurity cultivation so devastating is that it works best when it comes from someone you love, someone whose opinion matters, a partner, a parent, a friend. You start to believe that if they see these flaws in you, they must be real. So you shrink yourself. You hesitate before speaking. You second-guess decisions you used to make with ease. You start to ask for reassurance they once made you need, and they give it, just enough to keep you coming back. This tactic is designed to create emotional dependency. If you no longer believe in your own strength, you start relying on theirs. If you don't trust your beauty, your choices, your mind, they become the source of truth. And that's exactly what they want. Because when you need someone to tell you who you are, they control who you become. Insecurity cultivation doesn't look like domination. It looks like help. It looks like love with a leash. And the more broken you feel, the more they tighten it, reminding you always that without their guidance, without their honesty, you might just fall apart, even though it's them who's been slowly taking you apart from the beginning. Illusion of choice. The illusion of choice is a masterstroke of psychological control. It's not about removing your freedom. It's about making you believe you had freedom while leading you exactly where they wanted. It's a manipulation cloaked in empowerment, a carefully rigged game where every option funnels into their desired outcome. You feel autonomous, even proud of your decision. But the truth, the decision was never really yours. This tactic is so subtle, it often feels like agency. It's totally up to you, they say with a smile. But behind that smile is a framework they've already built, a landscape where all the choices you're given have been pre-filtered, pre-framed, and psychologically weighted to steer you toward one specific path. They've made one option look easier, kinder, safer, or more aligned with your values. And while you debate, hesitate, and weigh your options, they already know what you'll pick. In relationships, it might sound like, you're free to leave if you want. Just know I won't be here when you come back. Or, we can do whatever you want tonight, but I already told everyone we'd go to the party. It feels like you're making the call, but the emotional stakes, the social pressure, the quiet consequences are already in place. You choose, but only within the box they built. This is what makes the illusion of choice so dangerous. It bypasses resistance by offering a false sense of control. You're not being coerced, you're being guided. And the moment you agree, they've won twice. Not only did you comply, but now you also own the decision. You can't blame them because technically you chose it. It happens in parenting, in management, in sales, in manipulation. Give two bad options and one better one, and suddenly the victim feels grateful just for being allowed to choose. But the emotional manipulation is deep. It's not just about the outcome. It's about eroding your confidence in your own judgment without you even realizing it. And over time, you stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what would they want me to pick? That's when they no longer need to manipulate you, because now you're doing it to yourself. Echoic manipulation. Echoic manipulation is the subtle, psychological tactic of repeating someone's own words, phrases, or emotional language back to them, not as a show of understanding, but as a way to quietly disarm, influence, and gain control. It feels like empathy. It sounds like connection, but beneath the mirror lies manipulation, because the goal isn't to validate you. It's to lead you by reflecting your voice so perfectly that you stop guarding it. Humans are hardwired to respond positively when we hear our own language echoed. It makes us feel seen, safe, understood. If someone uses your phrasing, your tone, even your metaphors, your brain reads that as, they're like me. That familiarity builds trust, fast. And that's exactly what the manipulator wants. Not earned closeness, but manufactured intimacy they can weaponize. It starts subtly. You say you're drained, and they say, yeah, I've been feeling so drained too. You mention how something made you feel invisible, and suddenly, they've felt invisible their whole life. It creates a false mirror, a reflection of your emotions that makes you feel bonded. But as the conversation deepens, something shifts. They begin steering you, using your own language to validate their perspective, feeding your words back to you in ways that shape your thoughts, soften your resistance, blur your boundaries. This technique is often used in manipulative relationships, cults, interrogation tactics, or toxic leadership. It feels like you're being listened to deeply, but in reality, your words are being harvested, repurposed, and aimed right back at you to gain leverage. Because once someone knows how you speak about your fears, your desires, your insecurities, they can echo them to gain your trust, then subtly redirect your decisions. And when things go wrong, when you feel off balance, confused, or led astray, it's hard to trace the manipulation. After all, they just said what you said, right? You don't realize that the echo wasn't a reflection of understanding. It was a mask, a psychological mimicry meant to lower your defenses so your resistance would collapse under the illusion of connection. By the time you realize they've been speaking in your voice, your guard is already down and your trust already given. Silence as punishment. Silence as punishment is not quiet. It's deafening. It's a form of emotional warfare that doesn't require yelling, insults, or violence, just absence, a cold, calculated withdrawal of presence, affection, acknowledgement. The silent treatment isn't about needing space. It's about creating lack of validation, lack of resolution, lack of warmth. And in that empty space, control takes root. When someone uses silence as punishment, they don't slam doors. They disappear behind them. They vanish into unread messages, unanswered calls, hollow stares. They retreat not to find peace, but to watch you unravel, to make you feel the weight of disconnection, to turn your need for closeness into a weapon against you. And the longer it lasts, the more desperate you become, not just to be heard, but to feel real again in their world. At first, you think they're just hurt, maybe overwhelmed. You reach out. You apologize, even if you're not sure what you did. You walk on eggshells, begging for crumbs of reaction, a text, a glance, a word. And when it finally comes, if it comes, it feels like mercy. But it's not. It's reinforcement. It's the manipulator rewarding you for surrendering, for learning that love must be earned through silence and suffering. This is why silence as punishment is so psychologically damaging. It doesn't just hurt, it conditions. It rewires your nervous system to equate affection with anxiety. You begin to fear conflict, not because of what is said, but because of what isn't. You learn that mistakes mean exile, that honesty risks abandonment, that expressing your needs might cost you connection. In relationships, this shows up as days of icy distance after a disagreement. In families, it's a parent who won't speak until you shape up. In workplaces, it's being shut out of conversations or decisions as a subtle form of discipline. And in each case, the message is clear. You don't matter unless I say you do. But what makes this tactic truly cruel is how invisible it is to outsiders. There are no bruises, no screaming, just you, left alone with a silence that's louder than any shout, questioning your worth, your sanity, your place in someone's life. Because when love becomes quiet, you don't just miss the words, you begin to miss yourself. Microshaming. Microshaming is a form of emotional sabotage that comes dressed as humor, concern, or casual observation. It's the art of making someone feel small in a way that's hard to call out, because on the surface, it looks like nothing, just a joke, just a tease, just playing around. But underneath, it's a calculated jab at your confidence, delivered in doses so tiny and frequent that you begin to shrink without realizing why. It's the offhand comment when you speak up, "Wow, someone's feeling brave today." The sarcastic smile when you share a dream, "Well, aren't you ambitious?" The glance at your plate followed by, "Going all in tonight, huh?" These aren't overt attacks. They're barbed whispers, laugh-lined cuts. And if you protest, they'll always have a defense ready. "Relax, I'm just joking. You're too sensitive. You know I love you." That's what makes microshaming so damaging. It's designed to be deniable. If you react, you become the problem. The humor becomes your guilt. And that guilt, that's part of the plan. because now you're not only feeling insecure, you're questioning whether you're allowed to feel that way. This tactic is often used by people who feel threatened by your growth, your confidence, or your light. Rather than confront their discomfort, they chip away at you in socially acceptable ways, in front of others, in private, with a smirk, with a wink. And each time the message is clear. Don't rise too high, don't stand too tall, stay where I'm comfortable seeing you. In relationships, microshaming can slowly dismantle self-esteem. You begin second-guessing your outfit, your voice, your ideas. You start avoiding topics, shrinking your presence, softening your confidence, not because someone told you to, but because their jokes trained you to. And that's the cruelty of it. The shame becomes self-inflicted. Microshaming doesn't break you all at once. It doesn't need to. It just needs to be consistent, quiet, dismissible, so you never feel justified in calling it what it is, emotional manipulation masked as banter. And by the time you do, you've already learned to laugh at your own dimming light. Subtle sabotage. Subtle sabotage is a silent betrayal that unfolds in smiles, side comments, and just enough doubt to taint your image without drawing attention to the attack. It's not an obvious insult. It's not public humiliation. It's more dangerous than that because it slips under the radar. It's the quiet, calculated effort to make you look bad, incompetent, or unstable, while the saboteur keeps their hands clean and their reputation intact. It often begins with something small, something that could almost be laughed off. They accidentally leave you out of an important email. They forget to mention your contribution in a meeting. They joke about your flaws in a way that gets a laugh but leaves a sting. To everyone else, it looks harmless. To you, it feels like tiny fractures spreading through your credibility. This tactic thrives on plausible deniability. They make you seem paranoid if you speak up. You're too sensitive. I was just teasing. You're reading too much into it. But you're not, because you can feel it. The sideways glances, the growing skepticism in others' eyes. You feel the shift in how people treat you, not because of what you did, but because of what was implied. In workplaces, it's the colleague who always forgets to include you, who subtly questions your competence, just loud enough for others to hear. In social groups, it's the friend who shares your secrets with a laugh, just vague enough to hide behind. In families, it's a sibling or parent who constantly points out your past, your failures, your worst moments, all under the guise of just being honest. The genius of subtle sabotage is that it makes you defend yourself without a visible attack. You start over-explaining, trying to fix what's been tarnished behind your back. And to everyone else, you look unstable, you look insecure, because the sabotage was never loud, just clever enough to stay hidden in plain sight. And when you confront them, they act innocent, hurt, even, as if you're the one attacking them. They'll say they support you. They'll smile in public, but behind closed doors, they pull threads until your image begins to unravel, and no one knows why, except you. You know, you feel it every time they smile and slip the knife a little deeper. False consensus. False consensus is a psychological trap that uses the illusion of collective agreement to isolate, pressure, and manipulate. It's the lie that says, everyone feels this way but you, designed to make you doubt your judgment, abandon your stance, and conform, not because it's right, but because you're afraid to stand alone. It doesn't rely on truth. It relies on the terrifying human fear of being the outsider. This tactic is rarely screamed. It's delivered in casual tones, with shrugged shoulders and confident certainty. We all think you're overreacting. Everyone else agrees this is the best decision. No one had a problem with it until you did. It creates a crushing weight. The idea that your discomfort, your resistance, your concern isn't just wrong, it's abnormal, out of step, embarrassing. And that's exactly the point. False consensus doesn't aim to change your mind with logic. It wants to silence you with shame. Humans are social creatures. From childhood, we are wired to seek belonging, to avoid rejection. So when we're told that a group, real or imagined, disagrees with us, a panic sets in, a subtle creeping panic that says, blend in or be left behind. And so often, without realizing, we shrink, we nod along, we question what we were so sure of just moments before. But here's the manipulation: the everyone being referenced, they often don't exist, or they haven't said anything at all. The person using this tactic counts on you never checking, never asking, never calling the bluff, because the moment you do, the illusion collapses. This is especially common in workplaces, friend groups, family dynamics, and toxic relationships, places where someone wants to maintain control unchallenged. They invoke the group as a weapon. They isolate you with a fiction, and if you push back, you're no longer debating the issue, you're labeled the problem, the difficult one, the outsider. False consensus is designed to make you abandon yourself, to surrender your gut in exchange for acceptance. But what they're offering isn't belonging, it's compliance. And what they take from you isn't just your voice, it's your belief that it ever mattered in the first place. Monopolizing pain. Monopolizing pain is a cruel and deeply invalidating mind game where someone takes your hurt, your trauma, your vulnerability, and turns it into a competition. You come forward with your pain, hoping to be heard, supported, or simply seen, but instead of empathy, you're met with something colder, sharper. That's nothing. You should have seen what I went through. It doesn't matter what you're going through. Grief, anxiety, burnout, heartbreak, they always have it worse, and they make sure you know it, not with blatant cruelty, but with veiled superiority. They hijack the conversation, reroute your emotions, and place themselves back at the center. Suddenly, your pain isn't allowed to exist on its own. It only exists in comparison to theirs, and it always comes up short. This isn't about shared experience. It's not bonding over struggle. It's about control, about making you feel like your suffering is small, selfish, or even shameful. When you cry, they remind you they bled. When you're overwhelmed, they remind you they endured worse and didn't complain like you are. You're left not only hurting, but guilty for having hurt in the first place. And that guilt is exactly where the power shifts. You retreat, you shut down, you stop expressing your emotions because you've been taught they're not valid unless they're the worst. You start minimizing your own experiences before they even get the chance to. You internalize the message that unless you're broken beyond repair, your pain doesn't matter. In relationships, this shows up as a partner who refuses to comfort you because they're the one who's always had it harder. In families, it's the parent who responds to your stress with, "Try raising 3 kids with no help." In friendships, it's the person who turns every vulnerable moment into their own personal stage. And each time, you're left smaller. Silence. What makes monopolizing pain so damaging is that it masquerades as toughness, but it's not strength. It's emotional selfishness. It's the need to dominate even in suffering, to make sure no one else ever takes the spotlight, not even in their darkest moments. Because to them, empathy is weakness, and your pain, it's just an interruption to theirs. Ingratiation. Ingratiation is the velvet glove of manipulation, the use of excessive praise, flattery, and admiration, not to build genuine connection, but to lower your defenses and gain influence over you. It feels like affection. It sounds like support, but beneath the sweet words lies a strategic agenda. Win your trust so completely that you stop questioning their motives and start bending to their will. It begins with compliments that feel intoxicating. They tell you you're brilliant, stunning, irreplaceable. They laugh at all your jokes. They hang on your every word. They tell you that no one else gets it like you do. And it feels good. You feel seen, appreciated, chosen. But that's not generosity. It's bait. Because what follows isn't just gratitude. It's expectation. Now you're primed to say yes, to forgive quickly, to overlook red flags. Why? Because someone finally sees your worth. You don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to lose that glow of being admired. So, when they ask for a favor, a secret, a sacrifice, you give it. And when they overstep, you hesitate to push back. After all, they've only been kind to you. That's the brilliance of ingratiation. It doesn't coerce you. It seduces you. It hijacks your need for validation and feeds it so intensely that you mistake manipulation for love. And the more you rely on their praise to feel valuable, the more power they gain. You start adjusting who you are to keep their approval flowing. You let them closer, faster. You stop asking, why are they being so nice to me? Because the answer feels too good to question. But genuine admiration is steady, grounded, respectful. Ingratiation, on the other hand, is excessive, unbalanced, almost performative. It inflates your ego just enough to blind you, to make you feel indebted, to make you need their voice in your life until they decide to withhold it. And when they do, when the flattery dries up, you're left confused, scrambling to win back something that was never real, because their affection wasn't a gift, it was a lever, and once they've moved you into place, they no longer need to pull. Hollow apologies. Hollow apologies are empty words wrapped in the appearance of accountability, uttered not to heal, not to change, but to silence. It's the quick "I'm sorry" that feels strangely cold, like a door slamming in your face when you were finally being heard. These apologies are not bridges, they're barricades. They are used to shut down conversations, not open hearts. They stop the bleeding, not with care, but with a bandage made of indifference. You can feel the difference instantly. The tone is flat, the eye contact is gone. There's no pause, no reflection, no trace of emotional risk, just a swift, shallow, "I said I'm sorry, what more do you want?" And in that moment, you're no longer talking about the wound, you're now defending why you're still bleeding. The person offering the hollow apology isn't remorseful, they're uncomfortable. Your pain is inconvenient, your truth too loud. They're not trying to understand what hurt you, they're trying to make you stop talking about it. And so they offer you the illusion of closure, a placeholder for healing, a word with no weight. In relationships, this is devastating. You finally build up the courage to say, "This hurt me," and they interrupt with a rushed, "Sorry, okay?" It's not said with softness, it's said with impatience, as if your vulnerability is an annoyance, not a call for connection. And when you don't instantly forgive, they turn the tables. "I said sorry, why are you still upset?" Now, you're not the hurt one, you're the unreasonable one, the difficult one. That's the trap. Hollow apologies flip the emotional power. They make you feel guilty for still feeling pain, even though they've done nothing to make it right. No change, no conversation, no accountability, just a word they hope you'll take like a pill to make the discomfort go away. And the worst part? You start to question yourself. Maybe I am dragging this out. Maybe I should just let it go. But deep down, you know the apology was never meant for you. It was meant for them, to clear their conscience, to reset the scoreboard, to escape responsibility while pretending to carry it. Because when sorry is just a sentence and never a shift, it doesn't mend the wound. It deepens it. Selective reinforcement. Selective reinforcement is one of the most psychologically gripping manipulation tactics because it doesn't just toy with your emotions, it rewires your brain. At its core, it's the calculated act of rewarding someone's behavior inconsistently to create emotional dependency. It's not about encouragement, it's about control, and it mimics the exact cycle that keeps gamblers pulling levers and addicts chasing highs. This tactic doesn't give you what you want when you deserve it. It gives you what you want just enough, at unpredictable intervals, to make you crave it. Love, attention, approval, affection. They come in flashes, a sweet text after days of silence, a rare compliment after a string of criticisms, a night of passion following weeks of distance. It's not frequent enough to feel secure, but it's just enough to keep you hoping. The result is a dangerous loop. You start chasing the reward, not because it feels good, but because the absence feels unbearable. You try harder, give more, twist yourself into shapes just to get the spark you once felt. The inconsistency becomes addictive. You live in anticipation of the next high and in fear of the next low. And over time, they don't even need to reward you anymore. You'll keep showing up because you might get it. This tactic is used in toxic relationships, emotionally abusive partnerships, and even manipulative parenting. It creates a power imbalance rooted in unpredictability. The person doling out attention becomes the emotional dealer, and you become the dependent. You stop trusting your own worth and start waiting for them to define it, one breadcrumb at a time. Selective reinforcement isn't accidental. It's a form of psychological conditioning. They know that if they praised you constantly, you'd feel secure, and secure people have boundaries. But if they praise you sporadically, you'll work for it. You'll question yourself. You'll stay. And that's the point. You stay, not because it's good, but because it was good, once, or briefly, or maybe will be again. You stop living in the reality of how they treat you and start living in the memory of who they were that one time. And that memory, that hit of hope, that's what keeps you hooked. Doubt seeding is a quiet, corrosive manipulation that doesn't come at you head on. It drips into your mind slowly, like poison disguised as concern. It's the deliberate planting of tiny uncertainties, subtle suggestions that seem innocent at first. A raised eyebrow, a half question, a well-timed, "Are you sure?" that slips under your skin and starts to rot your confidence from the inside out. It doesn't need to be loud to be lethal. That's the brilliance of it. The manipulator doesn't attack your decisions directly. They don't need to. Instead, they chip away at your certainty with passing remarks. "That's what you're wearing? You think that's a good idea? I don't know. That just doesn't seem like you." And just like that, something you felt good about becomes fragile. You start to second-guess yourself, not because the choice changed, but because they made you change how you see it. This tactic is especially effective because it mimics care. It looks like concern, it sounds like protection, but it's actually control. It's someone subtly undermining your instincts so that you start looking to them for guidance. You start asking for approval before you act. You seek reassurance you never needed before. You become dependent, not because you're weak, but because they've convinced you that your inner voice can't be trusted. In relationships, this shows up when a partner questions your judgment constantly, quietly, until you feel like you're always one decision away from messing everything up. In friendships, it can be the friend who always has a way of making you feel like you're doing too much, not enough, or just the wrong thing altogether. In work, it's the co-worker or boss who makes every idea feel premature or poorly thought out, even when it's brilliant. The cruel beauty of doubt seeding is that it leaves no fingerprints, no loud arguments, no blatant sabotage, just a trail of your own unraveling. And when you finally collapse into insecurity, they get to say, "I was just trying to help," as if your self-doubt is something that just happened, rather than something they carefully, intentionally grew. Because doubt seeding isn't about protecting you. It's about weakening you until your trust in yourself disappears and all that's left is them. Faux ignorance. Faux ignorance is a subtle yet deeply frustrating manipulation tactic where someone pretends not to understand a task, request, or emotional cue, not because they can't, but because they won't. It's the strategic performance of confusion, incompetence, or forgetfulness to sidestep responsibility, avoid confrontation, or keep control, all while maintaining an innocent, blameless facade. It often starts with a simple, "Oh, I didn't know," or "I wasn't sure what you meant." You explain again and again. You spell things out. You make it easier for them. But the more you try, the more they seem to misunderstand. They always need clarification, always seem one step behind, always somehow miss the memo. And every time, the burden falls back on you, your time, your energy, your patience. You become the manager of their alleged confusion. But make no mistake, it's not ignorance, it's strategy. Because the second that playing dumb gets them what they want, freedom from effort, accountability, or emotional labor, they'll keep doing it. They'll act like they don't know how to clean something properly. So you stop asking. Like they don't understand why you're upset, so they don't have to apologize. Like your boundaries are too confusing, so they can keep crossing them with a shrug. Faux ignorance thrives in relationships where one person is already doing more emotional processing, more problem solving, more caretaking. It reinforces imbalance because while you're over-functioning to compensate for their supposed confusion, they're coasting. And when you finally get frustrated, they flip the script. Why are you being so hard on me? You know I'm trying. They turn their feigned incompetence into your guilt. What makes this tactic especially damaging is how it erodes your emotional sanity. You start to question yourself. Was I unclear? Am I expecting too much? You begin over-explaining, over-accommodating, over-functioning, and they do less and less. And the truth is, they understand perfectly well. They just don't want to be responsible. So they opt out quietly, passively, and with just enough innocence to make you look like the unreasonable one, all while you carry the weight of what they pretend they can't. Credibility erosion. Credibility erosion is a slow, insidious psychological tactic designed to quietly dismantle someone's image, piece by piece, word by word, until others no longer trust them and they begin to question themselves. It's not a loud attack. It's not a smear campaign. It's more delicate than that, more sinister. It's death by whispers, a manipulation that works not by tearing someone down, but by loosening the foundation they stand on until everything around them crumbles. The person who erodes your credibility doesn't call you a liar. They just raise a brow when you speak. They don't accuse you of being unstable. They simply mention your moods in passing. They say things like, "She means well, but you know how she gets." Don't take it personally. He's just been under a lot of stress lately. They sound concerned, even supportive, but beneath that concern is a blade. This tactic is brutal because it works in silence and suggestion. It invites doubt into the minds of others without ever looking like slander. Friends begin hesitating before believing you. Co-workers stop consulting you. Partners ask, "Are you sure that's what happened?" And you don't even see the damage at first. You only start to notice the change in how people respond to you. A slow pulling away, less trust, more skepticism. The worst part? It often comes from someone close, someone who claims to be in your corner. That's what makes their quiet sabotage so believable. They've positioned themselves as the balanced one, the reasonable voice, while you're slowly framed as unreliable, emotional, reactive, unsteady. You feel like you're shouting into a void, while they calmly and casually dismantle your credibility with a smile. And when you confront them, they're ready. They'll say, "I never said anything bad about you." And they're right, technically, because that's how credibility erosion works. It's the absence of direct blame that makes it so impossible to pin down. No accusations, just doubt, just enough to leave you isolated in a room full of people who now hesitate when you speak. It's not just your reputation that's attacked, it's your voice, your presence, your truth. And by the time you realize someone has been slowly rewriting how the world sees you, you've already started wondering if they're right. Drama inflation. Drama inflation is a psychological magnifying glass used not to gain clarity, but to distort reality and stir emotional chaos. It's the act of taking something minor, something fixable, something ordinary, and blowing it so wildly out of proportion that it demands your full attention, drains your energy, and shifts the emotional power to the person inflating it. It's not about solving problems. It's about controlling the room through theatrical distress. This tactic works because human empathy is reflexive. When someone appears upset, we instinctively tune in. We comfort, we listen, we adjust our tone, our plans, our boundaries, especially if we think we've caused the upset. The drama inflator knows this. They know that by turning a small inconvenience into a huge deal, they can redirect focus, gain sympathy, and manipulate outcomes. You forgot to text back. Now you don't care about them. You disagreed slightly. Suddenly you're always attacking them. You changed a plan. Now you've completely betrayed their trust. The escalation is fast, emotional, and completely disproportionate. And in the storm of their overreaction, you often miss what's really happening. They're controlling you by controlling the emotional tone of the space. This technique is especially common in relationships with narcissistic, emotionally immature, or manipulative personalities. It allows them to avoid accountability, shift blame, and dominate conversations. The real issue, what was actually said or done, gets buried beneath the noise. And you become more focused on calming them down than standing your ground. Over time, drama inflation wears you down. You become hypervigilant, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another outburst. You minimize your needs, silence your thoughts, and compromise on things that shouldn't require compromise just to keep the peace. And the worst part? When the dust settles, they act like you were the one who made it a big deal. Because that's the manipulation. The issue isn't the issue. Your reaction to their reaction becomes the new problem, and they never have to face what they've distorted, only what you've caused. Drama inflation turns tension into a tactic, and once you're stuck responding to the performance, you've already lost control of the plot. Backhanded compliments. Backhanded compliments are poison wrapped in praise, statements that sound flattering on the surface but sting underneath. They slip into conversations like kindness, but leave behind confusion, doubt, and a subtle ache in your self-worth. The words might sparkle, but there's a blade buried in every syllable, because the true intent isn't to lift you up, it's to remind you where you don't measure up, even when you think you do. They say, "You look great for your age. I never expected someone like you to pull that off. You're smarter than you seem." And for a second, you smile, but then it hits, that slow, sinking feeling. The praise wasn't pure. It was laced with judgment, condescension, or comparison. It wasn't a gift. It was a test. Backhanded compliments are a subtle form of dominance. They let the speaker maintain social control while appearing polite, clever, or even generous. The person giving them gets to sound kind while still delivering a subtle insult. And if you call them out, they raise their hands in mock innocence. "Wow, I was just being nice. You're so sensitive. It was a compliment. What's your problem?" Now, not only are you hurt, you're made to feel like the problem for not being grateful. This manipulation is especially potent because it hits you in places you're vulnerable. You start to wonder, was that really kind? Am I overthinking this? Did I just get insulted or appreciated? That emotional confusion is the trap because it makes you less likely to trust your instincts, more likely to tolerate subtle disrespect, and increasingly unsure of where you stand with the person who's doing it. In relationships, backhanded compliments can quietly chip away at your self-esteem while making the other person look charming or witty. In professional settings, they're used to undermine colleagues under the guise of encouragement. Great presentation, especially considering how nervous you looked. It's framed as support, but it's really a shot to your confidence, publicly delivered. The cruelty is in the contradiction. They make you question your worth while expecting your gratitude. They smile as they cut, and you're left standing there, holding a compliment that doesn't feel good, trying to convince yourself it was supposed to. Personal space invasion. Personal space invasion is a visceral, deeply unsettling form of psychological and physical manipulation. It's not about affection. It's not about closeness. It's about control. This tactic involves deliberately stepping too close, standing over you, brushing past you unnecessarily, or looming in your physical space, not to connect, but to unnerve, to assert silent dominance, to make your body react before your brain even understands what's happening. We all have an invisible boundary around us, a comfort zone shaped by culture, instinct, and survival. When someone enters that space uninvited, especially without reason, your body registers it as a threat. Your heart races, your shoulders tense. You might step back, look down, or freeze. That physical reaction is ancient. It comes from a place of protecting your safety, and the manipulator knows it. This tactic is used in countless power dynamics. A boss who leans in too close during a conversation, a partner who blocks a doorway during an argument, a stranger who stands inches behind you in line. These aren't accidents. They are deliberate, calculated breaches designed to make you feel off balance, small, cornered. And when you react, when you flinch, move, or stiffen, they gain the upper hand. What makes personal space invasion so disturbing is its deniability. If you call it out, they'll act confused. I didn't even notice. Relax. I'm not doing anything. And suddenly, you look like the one overreacting. They turn your discomfort into a joke or a misunderstanding while maintaining the very pressure that's making you feel unsafe. In emotionally abusive relationships, this tactic can be used to wear down resistance. In professional environments, it's a power move wrapped in false intimacy. In public, it's a way to dominate quietly without saying a word. It leaves you feeling watched, intruded upon, claimed, not because they want closeness, but because they want control without confrontation. And the worst part? Your instincts are screaming, but you're doubting them because they didn't touch you, they didn't yell, they just stood too close. But that discomfort in your gut, that tension in your chest, that's your body recognizing the truth before your mind catches up. They're not near you by accident. They're there to own the space you no longer feel welcome in. Lowballing is a manipulation tactic dressed as a negotiation. On the surface, it looks like a simple offer, maybe even a mistake, but underneath, it's a psychological strategy designed to wear you down, insult your worth, and pressure you into settling for far less than you deserve. It's not just about offering less. It's about undermining your value so thoroughly that you begin to question it yourself. The tactic starts with an unreasonably low offer, so low it feels like a joke, a job salary that barely covers living expenses, a request to do hours of work for exposure, an offer in a relationship that gives you crumbs of affection, time, or effort. And while your instinct may be to reject it outright, something strange happens. The longer you sit with that low ball, the more it starts to work on you. You begin to rationalize. Maybe this is the best I can get right now. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm not worth what I thought I was. That's the trap. Because lowballing isn't about the initial number. It's about the psychological erosion that follows. The manipulator is counting on your discomfort, your politeness, your desperation. They know that over time, fatigue, doubt, and the fear of missing out will soften your resistance. And when you push back, they pretend to be shocked. Wow, I thought you'd jump at this opportunity. You're being really difficult. Most people would be grateful. Now they've flipped the script. You're not a person defending your worth. You're someone being difficult, demanding, or unrealistic. Lowballing often comes with a manufactured sense of urgency. This offer won't last, or there are plenty of others waiting. They pressure you to decide quickly, hoping you'll panic and accept less before you've had time to think clearly. And if you decline, they may walk away, not because your value was too high, but because you weren't desperate enough to take the bait. This tactic leaves a mark. Even if you walk away, the seed of doubt is planted. And if you accept, it doesn't feel like a win. It feels like surrender. Because lowballing isn't negotiation. It's coercion, masquerading as opportunity. Unfinished sentence bait. Unfinished sentence bait is a psychological lure, a manipulative silence, a dangling thread of words left intentionally incomplete to provoke curiosity, anxiety, or guilt. It's when someone starts a sentence, one charged with implication, emotion, or judgment, and then stops, mid-thought, mid-confession, mid-accusation. They let the silence hang just long enough to pull you in. You don't hear what they're thinking, but you feel it, and that's the hook. It looks like this. It's just funny how, and then nothing. I guess some people just don't care, with a sigh. You know, if I told you what I really thought, followed by a long pause and a sideways glance, you're left suspended, your mind racing to fill in the blanks. What did they mean? Are they angry? Did you do something wrong? Should you explain, apologize, defend? That's the game. The sentence wasn't meant to be finished. It was meant to be felt. It creates a power shift by stirring uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, you start reacting. You ask questions. You seek answers. You chase resolution. Meanwhile, they sit in control, calm, vague, withholding, forcing you to do the emotional labor they started. Unfinished sentence bait is especially effective in relationships where emotional manipulation thrives. The person using it rarely expresses themselves directly. Instead, they drop emotional landmines, unfinished thoughts laced with judgment or sadness, then retreat. If you call it out, they act innocent. I didn't mean anything by it. You're reading too much into things. But the truth is, they meant for you to read into it. That was the point. It's not communication, it's provocation. It keeps you second-guessing, analyzing every word, tone, pause. You begin trying to soothe feelings that were never clearly expressed, solve problems that were never fully named, answer questions that were never actually asked. Over time, you start filling in their silence with your guilt. This tactic is control through ambiguity, a psychological chess move where they say less and get more reaction, more vulnerability, more emotional sway, and the more you try to decode their silence, the more power you give to what was never actually said. Chronic comparison. Chronic comparison is a slow, grinding manipulation that wears down your self-worth by constantly measuring you against others. It's not always loud or cruel. It can be wrapped in casual remarks, subtle sighs, or nostalgic glances towards someone who's not you. But the message is always the same. You are not enough. Not like them. Not yet. At first, it might seem harmless. A partner saying, "My ex used to cook like this." A parent casually mentioning, "Your cousin already bought a house." A friend joking, "You're still working on that? Sarah finished hers weeks ago." These comments may not sting immediately, but over time, they begin to rot the roots of your confidence. You don't just hear their words, you start internalizing them. And before you know it, you're constantly measuring yourself against invisible standards you never agreed to. The manipulation lies in how chronic comparison subtly shifts your sense of identity. You stop seeing yourself as an individual with your own path, your own pace, your own voice, and instead become a shadow of someone else's success. You're not loved for who you are, but for how well you stack up against who you're not. In relationships, this can create emotional desperation. You find yourself trying harder, bending more, contorting your personality just to become the person they seem to admire more than you. In families, chronic comparison can create lifelong wounds, especially from parents who never quite said, "I'm proud of you," but never stopped saying, "Look what your brother did." In workplaces, it's the manager who constantly points out a colleague's performance to make you feel perpetually behind. The damage runs deep because it never lets you rest. Even in your best moments, you hear the echo. But are you better than them? Are you enough yet? It creates competition where there should be support, insecurity where there should be pride, and self-loathing where there once was self-trust. And when you finally speak up, they say it was just a comment, just motivation. I was trying to push you. You're just too sensitive. But the truth is, chronic comparison isn't about inspiring you to grow. It's about keeping you small by constantly reminding you who you'll never quite be. Social proof. Exploitation. Social proof exploitation is the manipulation of your primal need to belong, twisting the power of group opinion to pressure you into compliance. It doesn't rely on logic, fairness, or truth. It leans entirely on the fear that if you don't conform, you'll be rejected, alone, othered, labeled difficult, weird, or wrong. It's not just about influencing your choices, it's about hijacking your identity through the illusion of the majority. This tactic doesn't scream, it whispers. Everyone else agrees. Most people are on board. No one else seems to have a problem. You're told the choice has already been made, that the consensus is clear, implying you're the outlier, the problem, the holdout. And in a world where isolation feels like social death, that's often all it takes to push you over the edge. Humans are tribal by nature. Our brains evolved to equate acceptance with survival. So when faced with the idea that an entire group, real or imagined, has taken a side, we often override our instincts, our values, even our discomfort, just to fall in line. That's what makes social proof exploitation so effective. It bypasses rational analysis and plunges straight into the emotional core of fear and longing. Manipulators use this tactic in subtle but strategic ways. In relationships, all my friends think you're overreacting. In workplaces, the whole team's excited, why aren't you? In cult-like groups or toxic communities, everyone who's truly committed understands this. The message is clear: agree or be left out, align or be cast out. What makes this tactic so dangerous is that the group being referenced often doesn't exist or has been misrepresented. Maybe no one else even knows what's going on. Maybe others feel exactly as you do, but they're being silenced too. But the manipulator counts on your silence. They count on your fear, because the moment you believe you're alone in your view, you'll abandon it to escape that loneliness. Social proof exploitation weaponizes belonging. It turns the crowd into a tool of coercion. And if you aren't careful, you'll trade your truth for their comfort, just to avoid being the only one standing in the quiet. Victim inversion. Victim inversion is a masterclass in emotional manipulation, one that turns the truth inside out and casts the wrongdoer as the wounded. It's the tactic of flipping the script when held accountable, of slipping out of guilt and into sympathy by claiming they're the one who's been wronged. It's not just denial, it's a performance, and it's devastating because it steals not only your truth, but your right to be hurt. You come forward with your pain. You describe the betrayal, the lie, the boundary that was crossed. You speak not to attack, but to heal. But before the conversation can begin, they pivot. Suddenly, they're overwhelmed. I can't believe you'd think that of me. You have no idea how hard this is for me. After everything I've done for you, in an instant, they become the victim, and you become the villain for daring to bring it up. This inversion is subtle psychological warfare. You start to feel guilty for feeling hurt. You begin apologizing for the way you expressed your pain, not for the pain itself. The conversation shifts away from their actions and toward their feelings. Your experience gets buried beneath their theatrics, and when others are watching, it gets worse, because victim inversion plays beautifully to an audience. In relationships, it's the partner who cheats and then cries about how you made them feel unwanted. In families, it's the parent who hurt you, but insists you're breaking my heart by holding on to the past. In workplaces, it's the boss who lashes out at your concerns and then tells HR how attacked they felt. And each time, you're forced into silence, not by force, but by guilt. What makes victim inversion so damaging is that it isolates. You look around for support and find people comforting them. You question your memory, your delivery, even your right to feel what you feel. And the manipulator? They walk away clean, cloaked in sympathy, while you're left standing in a mess they made, wondering if it was your fault all along. Because victim inversion isn't just about dodging blame, it's about stealing empathy. It's about making sure the spotlight never stays on their harm, only on their hurt. Subtext layering. Subtext layering is a psychological tactic that speaks without speaking. It's the manipulation of meaning hidden beneath the surface of what's said, where the real message isn't in the words themselves, but in how they're delivered, what's left unsaid, and what's quietly implied. It's tone over text, silence over speech, and it can cut deeper than any outright insult because it leaves you defending yourself against something that was never technically spoken. It sounds like a compliment, but it lands like a threat. I guess you finally figured it out. It sounds like a question, but it feels like a dig. Are you sure you want to wear that? It's not what they said, it's how they said it. That slight smirk, that pause, that too sweet tone laced with condescension. It leaves you wondering, was that supportive or was that shade? Am I being oversensitive or were they being cruel? This is what makes subtext layering so psychologically destabilizing. It creates a fog of interpretation where you feel something is off but can't prove it. The words are technically safe, nothing you can call out without seeming paranoid or dramatic. But your nervous system knows. It reacts before your mind can explain. You feel dismissed, diminished, shamed, but you're left with nothing solid to stand on. Just a hunch, a sting, a rising feeling that something inside the sentence was meant to hurt. In toxic relationships, this is a common weapon, a partner who never says you're worthless, but constantly uses tone, timing, and implication to make you feel like you are. In families, it's the parent who praises one sibling while glancing at you like an afterthought. In workplaces, it's the manager who says your report is interesting in a way that sounds like underwhelming, but never elaborates. Subtext layering is emotional gaslighting dressed in subtlety. It lets the manipulator maintain plausible deniability. I didn't say that, they insist. And they didn't. Not in words, but you still walk away feeling insulted, doubted, judged, without a single statement to quote. It's how they make you shrink without shouting, how they shame without swearing, how they control the room without ever raising their voice. Because when meaning is buried in subtext, the wound is real, even if no one else hears it but you. Deflection game. The deflection game is a psychological escape hatch, used not to end a conversation, but to dodge it. It's the art of subtly shifting the focus away from accountability, discomfort, or truth, and redirecting it somewhere safer, somewhere you didn't intend to go. It feels like the topic just wandered off, like the tension dissipated naturally, but make no mistake, this isn't distraction, it's strategy, and it's built to protect one thing, them. You bring up a concern. I felt really hurt when you didn't show up. And instead of addressing it, they pivot. You always bring this up at the worst times. Now, you're no longer discussing your feelings. You're defending your timing. Or maybe they turn the focus to you. You're not exactly perfect either. And suddenly, you're on trial. That's the game. Shift the emotional weight. Not by denying the issue, but by changing its shape. You came for clarity, for closure, for honesty. But now you're in a fog, chasing threads that lead nowhere, and by the time you realize what happened, the original issue has vanished beneath layers of diversion. The deflection game is often masked as reason, logic, or emotional self-protection. They'll say they're too tired to talk about it, that it's not the right time, that you're being dramatic, and while those statements might be believable in isolation, when they always appear the moment truth nears the surface, they're not boundaries, they're blocks, defense mechanisms designed not to preserve peace, but to preserve control. This tactic is particularly common in relationships with people who fear vulnerability, responsibility, or exposure. To them, conflict isn't something to work through, it's something to escape, and deflection gives them that escape. without having to look like they're running. But here's the damage. Every time resolution is dodged, resentment grows. Your voice shrinks. You stop bringing things up because what's the point? And that's exactly what they want. The silence isn't accidental. It's earned through repetition, redirection, and just enough charm to make you question whether the conversation was even worth having in the first place. The deflection game doesn't end the conflict. It suspends it indefinitely until the silence becomes so loud you forget what you were fighting for, or worse, you start believing it was never that important anyway. Denial spiraling. Denial spiraling is a psychological manipulation that doesn't need to lie outright. It only needs to repeat the denial enough times until the truth starts to unravel inside your own mind. It's a slow, disorienting strategy where someone repeatedly rejects facts, conversations, or events that you know happen until your certainty dissolves into confusion. Over time, you're not just questioning the moment, you're questioning your memory, your sanity, your grip on reality. At first, it's subtle. You say, "You said that yesterday," and they respond, calm and unmoved, "No, I didn't." And because it's just one moment, you let it go. But it happens again and again. Each time, they reject the truth with such unwavering confidence, it creates a rift inside your mind. You remember what happened. You felt it. But their certainty makes you hesitate. Am I remembering this wrong? Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm overreacting. That's the spiral. The more you push, the more they resist. The more they resist, the more isolated you feel. They aren't raising their voice. They aren't accusing you of anything. They're just calmly, constantly telling you that you're wrong. And that calmness is the hook. They seem so sure, so collected. And you start to feel unstable. You start apologizing for pressing the issue. You shrink not because you believe them, but because you've stopped believing yourself. This is how abusers, gaslighters, and manipulators avoid accountability without ever sounding hostile. They don't need to argue the facts. They simply erase them over and over until you give up trying to hold on to them. They create a version of reality in which the past is liquid, flexible, and entirely under their control. In relationships, it sounds like, "That's not what I said. You're imagining things." You've always had a bad memory. In workplaces, it's, "We never agreed on that. That wasn't part of the plan. You must have misunderstood the email." These aren't just denials. They are designed to wear you down, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And the most dangerous part of denial spiraling is that eventually you stop confronting them, not because you believe them, but because you no longer trust your right to know what happened. You don't let go of the truth. You just get too tired to fight for it. Reputation theft. Reputation theft is a psychological con cloaked in charm. It's the quiet, calculated act of attaching oneself to the success, credibility, or influence of others, not to celebrate them, but to absorb their glow. It's not admiration, it's appropriation. A manipulator sees someone shining and, instead of building their own light, they stand just close enough to make it look like it's theirs too. It starts subtly. They name drop. They exaggerate the closeness of a relationship. "I work closely with her. He and I go way back." Maybe they mention a project they barely touched, but talk like it wouldn't have happened without them. They insert themselves into stories, into rooms, into circles they didn't earn, but do everything to appear as if they belong. And it works, because we're social creatures and we're wired to assign credibility through association. If someone seems connected to power, to brilliance, to admiration, we instinctively elevate them. We give them the benefit of the doubt. We assume if they're with them, they must be one of them. And just like that, the thief climbs a ladder they didn't build. In workplaces, reputation theft is rampant. Someone takes credit for ideas shared in private. They echo your language in meetings and bask in the praise. In social groups, they cling to the most respected, admired individuals, absorbing attention, using proximity to appear trustworthy, accomplished, interesting. And in romantic dynamics, they might reference their past partner's status, success, or desirability, not to process it, but to inflate their own value. The manipulator doesn't need to lie outright. Often, they just imply, just enough to suggest their fingerprints are on something great, without ever proving it. And when confronted, they feign humility. Oh, I didn't mean to take credit. I just admire what they've done, but the damage is already done. You believed they were more than they are. Reputation theft isn't about connection. It's about camouflage. The thief doesn't grow their own credibility. They siphon it from others, and by the time you realize they never earned the spotlight, they've already convinced the room that it belongs to them. False reassurance. False reassurance is comfort with a hidden agenda, a soothing lie told not to support you, but to disarm you. It's when someone tells you everything is fine, not because it is, but because they want you quiet, compliant, and no longer asking questions. It's a carefully constructed calm, designed to dull your instincts and make you feel safe, when in truth, you shouldn't. This manipulation works because it mimics care. It sounds like empathy. Don't worry about it. I've got it under control. You're just overthinking it. These words feel good in the moment. They slip into the cracks of your fear and patch them up with false warmth. But that warmth is hollow. You're being reassured not to relieve your burden, but to lower your guard. False reassurance is used to buy time, hide intentions, or avoid accountability. In relationships, it's a partner who says, you're just being paranoid, when you sense something is wrong. In the workplace, it's a manager who promises, you'll be the first to know, when a decision's already been made without you. In moments of crisis, it's the person who tells you to relax, not because the situation is under control, but because they don't want you to make a move. Over time, this tactic erodes your intuition. You begin to question your gut, to ignore the red flags you felt but were told to dismiss. You stop preparing, stop asking, stop noticing, because they kept saying it was fine, and you believed them. That belief wasn't naivety, it was trust, and they used it. What makes false reassurance so insidious is that it can't always be called out in the moment. It's not a lie you can fact-check immediately. It's a feeling, an instinct, a subtle knowing that something isn't right. But you've been told to stand down, and if you question it, they flip it on you. I'm just trying to help. You never believe me. Why do you always expect the worst? But the truth is, you did believe them. That was the mistake, because false reassurance isn't about calming your fears. It's about controlling them. It's not meant to help you breathe. It's meant to make you blind. Faux neutrality. Faux neutrality is the masterful art of pretending to stay out of the fight, while secretly tipping the scale. It's when someone presents themselves as the calm, reasonable, unbiased voice of balance, while subtly, often invisibly, taking sides and steering the outcome. They wear the mask of objectivity, but their hands are deep in the emotional machinery, guiding how others see the situation, how blame is distributed, and who walks away feeling misunderstood or diminished. This tactic is especially powerful because it disarms both sides. The faux neutral player appears above it all. They say things like, I'm just trying to help. I see both sides. Let's not point fingers. It sounds wise, balance. But if you listen closely, you'll notice the imbalance. They question your reactions, but not the other person's behavior. They validate one perspective as understandable and label yours as emotional, excessive, or complicated. They don't take a stand, but they subtly influence who gets heard, who gets dismissed, and who walks away holding the weight. In conflict, faux neutrality is infuriating. You try to express your experience, but they soften your words, reframe your pain, or insert doubt. Are you sure that's what they meant? Let's not jump to conclusions. You're left feeling gaslit, undermined by someone who claims they're not even involved. But they are, deeply, because neutrality, when used honestly, holds space for truth. Faux neutrality holds space for avoidance. It lets the manipulator preserve relationships with both sides while preserving their power over the dynamic. They get to be the calm one, the peacekeeper, the reasonable adult, while subtly eroding your credibility and protecting the status quo. In families, this shows up as the parent who refuses to intervene in clear dysfunction. In workplaces, it's the manager who avoids hard conversations under the guise of not taking sides. In friendships, it's the one who nods at your pain but also tells the other person they totally understand where they were coming from too. They don't stand beside you, they stand above you and watch while you sink. Faux neutrality isn't about peace, it's about control without accountability, influence without exposure. It allows them to shape outcomes while keeping their hands clean and their image intact. Emotional invalidation. Emotional invalidation is a quiet betrayal that slices deep. It's the act of dismissing, minimizing, or ridiculing someone's feelings, not to comfort them, but to control them. It doesn't always come as cruelty. Sometimes it sounds like advice, like logic, like concern, but underneath it says, your feelings aren't real, they're not worth my time, and they don't change anything. It starts in moments of vulnerability. You say, I feel overwhelmed, and they say, you're being dramatic. You say, that hurt me, and they respond, you're too sensitive. Or worse, they laugh, change the subject, or pretend not to hear. Each time, the unspoken message is the same. Your emotions are an inconvenience, an exaggeration, a problem. Emotional invalidation is a power play, because when someone denies your feelings, they don't just deny your experience, they deny your right to have one. They set the rules for what emotions are allowed, when they're appropriate, and how loudly they can be expressed. And when you inevitably fall outside those lines, they use your reaction to discredit you further. See, this is why I can't talk to you. It often masquerades as tough love or rationality. I'm just trying to help you see it clearly. But clarity isn't the goal. Control is, because when your emotions are invalidated enough times, you stop expressing them, you doubt them, you swallow your instincts and silence your pain, and in that silence, the other person gains ground. In relationships, this becomes emotional gaslighting. In families, it becomes generational wounding. In workplaces, it keeps people compliant and afraid to speak up, because when your feelings are consistently shut down, you begin to wonder if you're the problem, not the situation. And that's the heart of emotional invalidation. It takes your pain and turns it into your fault. It doesn't soothe, it silences, not to help you move forward, but to make sure you don't stand up, or speak out, or ask for anything more than quiet. Performance guilt. Performance guilt is the quiet punishment of success. It's the manipulation of your brightest moments into emotional burdens, designed not to celebrate your growth, but to shrink it. It happens when someone responds to your achievements not with pride, but with wounded silence, veiled resentment, or backhanded congratulations that twist your joy into guilt. It's not about what you did wrong. It's about the fact that you did well at all. At its core, performance guilt is emotional sabotage. You get the job, and they say, must be nice to have everything handed to you. You reach a goal, and they joke, don't forget us little people. You share good news, and they go quiet. Or worse, find a way to center themselves in your story. I guess I'll never get a break like that. You feel the shift immediately. The air changes, their reaction doesn't match your joy, and suddenly you're apologizing for shining too brightly. The person using this tactic often positions themselves as the underdog, the one overlooked, the one struggling. They make your success feel like a betrayal, like you've left them behind. They don't need to say it directly. It's in the way they withhold support, downplay your effort, or imply that your wins are somehow unfair. Over time, their disappointment trains you. You stop sharing your milestones. You dim yourself. You make yourself smaller so they won't feel small. This manipulation often hides behind phrases like, "You've changed," or "Don't forget where you came from." What they really mean is, "Don't rise without me." They want you to succeed, but not more than them. They want you to grow, but only if it doesn't remind them of their own stagnation. Performance guilt is especially insidious because it disguises itself as humility, as staying grounded. But humility doesn't make you feel ashamed of progress. This does. This makes you feel torn between who you're becoming and who you're leaving behind, and it teaches you to carry your accomplishments like a secret, or worse, a burden. But your success was never the problem. Their discomfort with your growth was, and the guilt you feel, that's not humility. That's emotional manipulation designed to keep you from soaring because someone else refuses to rise. Proximity, minding proximity. Minding is a powerful, often unconscious form of manipulation that uses physical closeness or deliberate distance as a tool for psychological control. It's the subtle art of shifting presence to influence emotions, assert dominance, or destabilize connection, all without saying a single word. Whether they move too close or withdraw just enough, the message isn't spoken, it's felt, and your nervous system hears it loud and clear. This tactic preys on one of the deepest human needs, the need for safe, secure connection. When someone you care about, or someone in a position of power, manages proximity strategically, your emotional state begins to revolve around their presence. They lean in when they want something. They hover when they're asserting pressure. They disappear when you need reassurance. They return when they sense your patience thinning. And you learn to read those movements like a survival map. In romantic relationships, this looks like hot-cold behavior, intense intimacy followed by emotional distance. In friendships, it's the person who's close when it's convenient, but suddenly unavailable when you're struggling. In workplaces, it's a boss who physically steps in during conflict to exert dominance or leaves you out of the room to remind you you're replaceable. The tactic isn't the words they say, it's where they are and where they aren't when it matters. The manipulator uses space like a lever. Too much proximity and you feel smothered, watched, unsettled, not enough, and you feel abandoned, ignored, discarded. The fluctuation keeps you emotionally off balance. You begin to chase closeness. You crave the return of the version of them that once made you feel important. And when they reappear, even briefly, it feels like relief, like love. But it's not love, it's control through absence. What makes proximity minding so insidious is its invisibility. You'll rarely be able to point to a single thing they did. And when you try to express your discomfort, they'll say, "What are you talking about? I've been here the whole time." Or worse, you're imagining things. But you're not. You felt the shift. You felt when the warmth vanished, when their presence stopped feeling safe and started feeling strategic. And by the time you start questioning it, you're already moving toward them, trying to fix a connection that they disrupted, just to make sure you're not being left behind. Moral leveraging. Moral leveraging is a deeply manipulative tactic that cloaks control in the language of virtue. It's when someone uses ethics, morality, or high-minded ideals not as guiding principles, but as weapons, as bargaining chips, as silent ultimatums that say, "If you don't do what I want, you're not a good person." It's not about what's right. It's about using what's perceived as right to make you feel wrong. It often begins with subtle framing. You express a boundary, and they say, "I just thought you were the kind of person who cared." You hesitate to sacrifice something for them, and they ask, "What happened to your compassion?" You say no, and they respond with disappointment that cuts deeper than anger, because it's not your actions they criticize, it's your character. Moral leveraging doesn't demand, it shames. It puts you on trial in your own conscience. And because most people strive to be decent, to live with integrity, the tactic works like a psychological vice. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I a bad friend? A cold partner? You override your needs to protect your identity as a good person, the very identity they're quietly threatening. This manipulation thrives in relationships where one person positions themselves as morally superior. They frame their desires as noble and yours as shallow. They play the role of the sacrificial one, the principled one, while subtly painting you as the selfish one if you don't fall in line. And the most dangerous part? They never ask for anything outright. They just create an emotional atmosphere where saying yes feels virtuous and saying no feels cruel. Moral leveraging turns your empathy into a leash. It transforms your values into tools of compliance. You're not making choices anymore. You're performing goodness under pressure. And even when something feels unfair, you hesitate to resist, because resistance now equals moral failure. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to guilt trip you in obvious ways. They just need to plant the idea that their needs are aligned with what's right. And if you disagree, the consequence isn't just conflict. It's the slow, shaming suggestion that you've become someone unworthy of your own integrity. Invisible scoreboard. The invisible scoreboard is a quiet, corrosive manipulation tactic where someone keeps a mental tally of every favor they've done, every sacrifice they've made, every wrong they've suffered, but never tells you until it benefits them. It's not about generosity, it's about leverage. They give, they endure, they let things slide, but not because they're selfless, because they're storing ammunition. You won't know the scoreboard exists until you step out of line. Then suddenly, the floodgates open. After everything I've done for you, do you remember when I supported you through that? I've never brought up what you did last year, but maybe I should. And just like that, you're cornered. Your current frustration, your present boundary, your valid need is buried beneath a history you didn't realize was being scored. This tactic is deeply manipulative because it distorts the meaning of kindness and forgiveness. What seemed like love or understanding now feels transactional. You thought they were being supportive, but they were tallying points. You thought they had moved on from a mistake, but they were just saving it for the perfect moment to put you in your place. In relationships, the invisible scoreboard becomes emotional blackmail. They bring up your past when they want to shut down your voice. They remind you of their sacrifices to guilt you into agreement. You're not having a conversation. You're defending yourself against a ledger you never saw. In workplaces, it can look like the colleague who says, "I've stayed late for you before. Can't you just help this once?" Or the boss who recalls how they bent the rules for you anytime you speak up. What they're really saying is, "I've been building a case, and now I'm collecting." The invisible scoreboard doesn't just control you. It erodes the integrity of the relationship. It turns emotional connection into silent accounting. You begin to question every act of kindness. Was this real, or was this another point added to the file? Over time, trust frays, because love doesn't keep score, but manipulation always does, and it waits for the day it can cash it in. Hyper-rationalizing. Hyper-rationalizing is the intellectual smokescreen people use to suppress, invalidate, or avoid emotional truth. It's the relentless over-explaining, justifying, and analyzing of painful or unjust experiences, not to understand them, but to disarm them, to strip them of emotional weight until what hurt no longer feels like it should hurt. It's not about clarity. It's about control of the narrative, of your reactions, of someone else's accountability. This tactic often looks polished, calm, even wise. They break down what happened with clinical precision. You have to understand where they were coming from. It wasn't personal. It makes sense if you think about it logically. And yes, there's truth in those statements, but that's the trick. They're not wrong. They're just incomplete. because what's missing, what's erased, is your right to feel. When someone hyper-rationalizes your pain, they don't attack it directly. They quietly bury it under layers of logic until it's unrecognizable. You bring up betrayal, and they respond with the betrayer's backstory. You express anger, and they cite statistics. You say, "This hurt," and they reply with, "Well, technically." The message is always the same. Your feelings are not the point. The facts are. But in that cold clarity, something vital is lost. You, your voice, your vulnerability, your need to be emotionally witnessed, not just intellectually understood. Hyper-rationalizing is often used by emotionally avoidant partners, manipulative professionals, or well-meaning people who are deeply uncomfortable with mess. It allows them to sidestep intimacy while appearing grounded. They don't raise their voice. They don't shut you down rudely, but they sanitize your experience so thoroughly that by the end of the conversation, you're apologizing for having felt anything at all. And sometimes we do it to ourselves. We explain away our grief, our anger, our exhaustion. We become the voice of reason when what we really need is to scream, cry, feel. We become so skilled at justifying that we forget how to simply hurt. Hyper-rationalizing isn't wisdom. It's emotional sterilization. And the more you rely on it, the more disconnected you become, not just from others, but from your own truth. Because not everything painful needs a theory. Some things just need to be felt. Shifting baseline. Shifting baseline is a psychological manipulation that changes your sense of what's normal, slowly and subtly, until you no longer recognize how far you've drifted from your original boundaries, standards, or sense of self. It's not a sudden shift. It's a recalibration, inch by inch, until the unacceptable starts to feel tolerable, and then inevitable. It begins quietly. Maybe they cancel plans once, then twice. Soon, you stop expecting consistency. Maybe they raise their voice in one argument. You flinch, but they apologize. The next time, it's louder, harsher, and before long, you're just grateful when they're calm. The baseline has moved, and with it, your sense of what's okay. This manipulation is devastating because it's gradual. You don't notice each individual shift in behavior, treatment, or expectation, but your nervous system does. Your anxiety increases, your confidence thins, and you begin adjusting, not because you want to, but because the new normal keeps changing, and you're just trying to keep up. The person using this tactic knows exactly what they're doing. They might start off overly kind, overly present, overly affectionate. So when the withdrawal begins, you chase the version of them they used to be. You justify their coldness because they weren't always like this. You excuse mistreatment because maybe this is just a rough patch. But what's really happening is recalibration. They're moving the baseline, and you are shrinking to meet it. In toxic workplaces, this shows up as shifting job expectations. You're praised for doing extra until doing extra becomes the bare minimum. In families, it shows up as tolerating more and more emotional neglect or criticism because it's just how we are. In relationships, it often looks like enduring behaviors you once said you'd never accept because now they're just part of the rhythm. Shifting baseline is powerful because it convinces you you're not being manipulated. You believe you're adapting, growing, being mature, but really you're being conditioned. What once would have shocked you now barely registers, and when someone points it out, you defend it. It's not that bad. They've just been stressed. It's better than it was. But the truth is, when someone keeps moving the baseline, you stop standing on solid ground, and the further you go, the harder it is to remember where the line even was. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a psychological war on your reality. It's the methodical, deliberate distortion of truth meant to make you question your memories, your perception, your sanity, until you begin to abandon yourself and trust the manipulator's version of the world instead. It doesn't start with overt cruelty. It starts with doubt, a raised eyebrow, a carefully worded denial, a gentle chilling that never happened. At first, it's subtle. You say, "I remember you said that." And they respond, "No, I didn't." You recall how something made you feel, and they say, "You're being too sensitive." You confront a pattern of behavior, and they accuse you of imagining things. They deny, deflect, and reframe so consistently, so calmly, that you begin to wonder, did I make that up? Am I overreacting? That's the trap. Gaslighting is not about winning an argument. It's about erasing your ability to argue at all. Over time, your confidence in your thoughts, feelings, and intuition erodes. You stop trusting yourself. You rely on them to interpret reality for you. And in doing so, they gain total control, not just over the situation, but over you. This tactic is devastating because it doesn't leave bruises. It leaves questions, silent, lingering questions that eat away at your clarity. The manipulator may seem calm, even reasonable, while you're left feeling unhinged, emotional, unstable, and they use that against you. They point to your reactions as proof that you're the problem. See, this is what I mean. Gaslighting happens in romantic relationships, families, workplaces, friendships, anywhere one person seeks power through distortion. It can be as explosive as a denial screamed during an argument, or as quiet as a change in the subject when the truth gets too close. What makes it so sinister is how it breaks you from the inside out. You begin to second guess what you saw, what you heard, what you know, and when you try to explain what's happening, it sounds confusing, because that's what gaslighting does. It makes clarity feel impossible. It replaces facts with fog. It turns truth into a maze, and by the time you realize you're lost, you've already given them the map. Love bombing. Love bombing is a psychological ambush disguised as devotion. It's an overwhelming flood of affection, praise, attention, and adoration, delivered early and fast, not to build intimacy, but to control it. It feels like fate, like magic, like you've finally been seen. But behind the grand gestures and relentless sweetness is a motive far more calculated: emotional capture. The person love bombing you moves with breathtaking intensity. They call constantly. They text all day. They shower you with compliments, gifts, fantasies about the future. "I've never felt this way before. I can't believe how perfect you are. I think I'm falling in love with you." And all of it happens within days or weeks. It doesn't feel rushed. It feels right, like you've been chosen, cherished, pulled into something sacred. But that's the trap, because love bombing isn't about you. It's about them. It's about establishing emotional dependency before you have time to think, to breathe, to notice red flags. The goal is to disarm you, to create a powerful emotional high that clouds your judgment. And once you're hooked, once you've opened your heart and begun to believe in the intensity, they flip the script. The message is slow, the tone shifts, the warmth begins to fade, and when it does, you don't just feel sad, you feel desperate. You chase the version of them that adored you. You question what changed. You ask what you did wrong. That's when the manipulation tightens. They've made you addicted to the emotional drug they control. Love bombing is not about love. It's about power through affection. The manipulator may not even be aware of what they're doing, but their actions are intentional. They use love like a spotlight, all-consuming, blinding, and flattering. But it's never sustainable, because it's not grounded in real connection. It's built on performance, speed, and fantasy. By the time the high wears off, you're already invested. You stay longer than you should. You excuse behavior you wouldn't have accepted. And you keep waiting for the person who bombed you to come back, not realizing they were never real. They were the hook. And now you're caught. Negging is a manipulative tactic disguised as flirtation, a calculated blend of insult and praise meant to subtly undercut someone's self-esteem while appearing like a compliment. It's the backhanded remark that makes you pause, laugh awkwardly, then question if you should feel flattered or offended. And that confusion, that emotional whiplash, that's exactly the point. Originating in the world of pickup artistry, negging was designed as a strategy to lower a target's value just enough to make them chase validation from the one who knocked them down. It's not about connection, it's about control. If they can make you feel just a little insecure, they can position themselves as the person who can restore your confidence after they broke it. You look great for someone your age. You're actually smarter than you seem. I usually don't go for girls like you, but there's something about you. These are not compliments, they're traps, carefully constructed to sting without drawing blood, to make you laugh while you flinch. And the danger is how subtle it is. You might brush it off. You might even feel compelled to prove them wrong. That's when it works best, when you feel the need to earn their approval, when the insult sinks into your skin so quietly you don't notice it until later. Negging relies on imbalance. It creates a power dynamic where one person feels slightly less than and the other assumes the role of the one who sees through the flaws. It's not just emotionally manipulative, it's psychologically predatory, because the goal isn't to uplift or impress you, it's to destabilize you, then become the anchor. This tactic thrives in social spaces that reward arrogance as confidence, cruelty as humor, and control as charm, and it disproportionately targets people who are confident, secure, or self-possessed, because shaking that confidence is the whole game. If they can make you question your worth, even for a moment, they've opened a door to influence. But a real compliment doesn't leave a bruise. Real interest doesn't need to disguise itself as insult. Negging isn't charm. It's calculated cruelty wrapped in wit, and you don't have to laugh along. Stonewalling. Stonewalling is silent warfare, a cold, calculated refusal to engage that doesn't need raised voices to do damage. It's not just ignoring someone, it's using silence, withdrawal, or emotional shutdown as a tool to punish, control, or manipulate. The words stop, the eyes avoid, the walls go up, and suddenly you're no longer in a conversation. You're in a cage made of absence. This tactic is especially devastating because it mimics a boundary but serves as a weapon. The person stonewalling doesn't say why they're withdrawing. They just do. They shut down mid-discussion. They walk away without explanation. They go dark, emotionally or physically, leaving you suspended in confusion. And in that silence, the message is clear. I control when you're worthy of being heard. At first, you try to fix it. You text, you knock on the door, you apologize, even if you're not sure what for. The emotional vacuum created by their silence becomes unbearable, and you begin negotiating with yourself just to bring them back. That's the power of stonewalling. It turns silence into leverage. It makes your need for connection something they get to grant or withhold at will. The manipulator counts on your discomfort, on the fact that humans are wired to seek resolution. When we care about someone and they shut down, our instinct is to reconnect, to soothe, to explain, to chase. And so the person who uses stonewalling never has to compromise or take accountability. You do all the emotional labor. You bend, you soften, you surrender just to feel them open back up. In relationships, this tactic creates a deep emotional imbalance. You learn not to raise concerns, not to bring up problems, not to ask for too much, because each time you do, the cost is silence. And that silence isn't passive, it's punishing. It says, speak up and I disappear. Push and I withhold. Need me and I'll make you wait. Stonewalling doesn't just end conversations, it ends safety. It teaches you that love is conditional, available only when you're convenient, quiet, agreeable. And by the time you realize you've stopped expressing your truth, you've already been trained to fear their silence more than your own voice. Future faking. Future faking is emotional fraud in the form of a promise. It's the deliberate act of painting vivid pictures of a shared future, grand plans, deep commitment, long-term dreams, not to build something real, but to secure something now: love, loyalty, sex, forgiveness, compliance. Whatever they want in the present, they buy it with the currency they never intend to spend: the future. This tactic often feels intoxicating at first. They talk about taking you on that dream trip, building a life together, starting a business, moving in, getting married. They speak with passion, with detail, with urgency, as if the future is already unfolding before you, and your heart opens, your defenses soften, you start to believe, because who wouldn't feel safe with someone who clearly sees you in their tomorrow? But future faking isn't about you, it's about control. The person using this tactic knows exactly what strings to pull. They recognize your hopes, your fears, your need for stability or romance, and they echo it back to you with perfect precision, not to honor it, but to exploit it. What makes future faking so cruel is that it feels like intimacy, like connection. You build emotional commitments based on what they say is coming. You wait, you invest, you sacrifice. All the while, they keep making promises just far enough out of reach to remain unfulfilled, yet close enough to keep you hooked. The truth is, they never intended to follow through. The promises were a performance, a transaction, and when you eventually question the delay, ask where the future went, they'll gaslight, deflect, or guilt trip you. Why are you rushing? You're being dramatic. You don't trust me? And somehow, you're left apologizing for wanting what they said was coming. Future faking doesn't just break hearts, it breaks time. It robs you of the present by anchoring you to a fantasy. It convinces you that the discomfort, the imbalance, the unmet needs are temporary, that they're all justified by what's just around the corner. But that corner never comes, because they were never walking toward it. They were just standing still, telling you stories about a future they never intended to meet you in. Blame shifting is a psychological sleight of hand where someone, faced with their own wrongdoing, subtly or aggressively turns the spotlight onto you. It's a defense mechanism turned weapon, a refusal to take responsibility wrapped in misdirection. When blame shifting is at play, you don't just lose the argument, you lose clarity, you lose certainty. You start defending yourself against things you didn't even do. It happens in a flash. You confront them about something real, a lie, a broken promise, a hurtful action, and instead of owning it, they pivot. Why are you always so negative? You're not exactly innocent either. If you weren't so demanding, maybe I wouldn't have done that. Suddenly, you're not talking about their betrayal anymore. You're talking about your tone, your flaws, your failures, and you find yourself spiraling, not just trying to explain the issue, but trying to prove that it's even valid. This is the brilliance and brutality of blame shifting. It destabilizes your sense of reality. The wrongdoer transforms into the victim, and the victim becomes the problem. And if you're empathetic, emotionally intelligent, or used to questioning yourself, it works even better. You step back, you reflect, you wonder, am I overreacting? Did I cause this? And that hesitation is all they need to escape accountability. In relationships, blame shifting is toxic glue. It keeps you stuck in endless cycles of conflict with no resolution. Every time you get close to truth, the focus changes. Every time you express a need, the spotlight turns on your past. You never get closure, just confusion. In families, it can become generational gaslighting. Parents who refuse to apologize shift blame to the difficult child. Siblings who hurt you spin it as your sensitivity. At work, it's the colleague who failed to deliver but points to your lack of support. What makes blame shifting so cruel is that it steals your right to be hurt. It takes your truth and buries it under a pile of defensive debris. And by the time you've dug through the mess, you're too exhausted to remember why you were upset in the first place. That's the goal, not to resolve the issue, to bury it and you with it. Projection. Projection is a defense mechanism dressed as an accusation. It's when someone takes their own feelings, behaviors, or intentions and assigns them to you. You become the liar, the manipulator, the unfaithful one, not because you are, but because they are. And instead of facing that truth, they hurl it at you like a shield, a smokescreen, a weapon. It's one of the most maddening manipulations to experience because it flips reality on its head. You're suddenly defending yourself against things you've never done, things they are guilty of but can't or won't own. So they project those truths outward onto the nearest mirror, you. And in doing so, they gain temporary relief from their own shame by transferring it to someone else. You confront them about something, and they spin it back with venom. You're so controlling. You're the one who's selfish. Why are you always twisting things? And you freeze, because the words coming out of their mouth feel eerily like the very thoughts you've had about them. That's not coincidence. That's projection doing its job, taking the emotional heat off them and setting it squarely in your lap. Projection often appears in toxic relationships, especially where someone is emotionally immature or threatened by accountability. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's unconscious, a person so terrified of their own guilt that they genuinely believe it belongs to someone else. But conscious or not, the result is the same. The truth becomes distorted, and the person being projected onto begins to question their own integrity. What makes projection so corrosive is its capacity to create confusion. When someone accuses you with the force of their own buried guilt, you feel the emotional charge, but not the logic. It feels unfair, but convincing. You start checking yourself. You over-apologize. You try to be better, not realizing you're cleaning up someone else's mess, one they refuse to even admit exists. And that's the trap, because projection isn't about fixing anything. It's about hiding. It's about redirecting the spotlight so the projector can remain unseen, safe in denial, while you absorb the fallout of their truth. They won't admit it, so they'll make you wear it. Breadcrumbing. Breadcrumbing is emotional manipulation at its most deceptive, an illusion of interest scattered in small, inconsistent pieces to keep someone hooked, without any real intention of committing, connecting, or showing up. It's not affection, it's not confusion, it's control through just enough attention, just enough flirtation, just enough hope to stop you from walking away. The breadcrumber doesn't ghost you. They don't disappear completely. That would give you clarity. No, they linger. They pop up just when you've started to detach. A "hey, stranger" text, a like on an old photo, a vague compliment in the middle of the night. They do the bare minimum to rekindle your curiosity, to reignite your longing, but never enough to build anything real. And that's the trap. They're always almost there, never present, never gone. It creates a cycle of anticipation and disappointment. You wait for the next message, replay their words, wonder what it meant, and when they finally reach out again, you feel relief, even excitement, because the drought is over. The emotional crumbs feel like a feast when you've been starving for consistency. This tactic thrives in the spaces between certainty and confusion, between presence and absence. It works especially well on people who are empathetic, hopeful, or afraid to give up on someone too soon, because breadcrumbing weaponizes hope. It makes you believe that maybe, if you're patient, if you try harder, if you prove your worth, they'll finally show up in the way you need them to. But they won't, because breadcrumbing isn't about connection. It's about control without effort. It gives the illusion of progress without the vulnerability of real intimacy. The person breadcrumbing you gets your energy, your attention, your emotional investment, while giving you almost nothing in return. Over time, it erodes your self-worth. You start accepting less than you need. You lower your standards. You rationalize their inconsistency. And worst of all, you begin blaming yourself for why they're not fully showing up. but it was never about you. It was never about being enough. It was about keeping you close, but never too close, just enough to feed the illusion, just enough to make you stay. Silent treatment. The silent treatment is one of the most emotionally punishing forms of manipulation because it doesn't wound with words, it wounds with absence. It's the intentional refusal to speak, acknowledge, or respond to someone, not as a form of healthy space or self-care, but as punishment, as control, as a weaponized silence designed to hurt, destabilize, and ultimately subdue. At first, it might look like someone needing space, but soon the silence grows heavy. You text, no reply. You speak, no response. You're met with cold stares, slammed doors, the hollow echo of your own voice in the room. And it doesn't just sting, it terrifies, because the connection, the lifeline of being seen, is suddenly cut. You're no longer being treated like a person. You're being erased. The silent treatment is meant to make you squirm, to trigger your anxiety, your guilt, your fear of abandonment. It forces you to play the emotional detective, replaying conversations, begging for answers, apologizing for things you don't even understand. And in that confusion, the person wielding the silence gains power. They don't have to explain. They don't have to face conflict. You do all the emotional labor just to restore peace. This tactic is especially cruel because it exploits our most basic psychological needs. Human beings are wired for connection. Being ignored, deliberately, coldly, is experienced by the brain as social death. That's why it works. That's why it hurts. Because it doesn't just punish the moment, it punishes who you are. In relationships, the silent treatment is often used after arguments, boundaries, or moments where the manipulator feels exposed. Instead of engaging, they disappear. Instead of resolving, they withdraw. And when they finally return, there's no accountability, only a quiet, loaded expectation that you will be grateful they're talking to you again. But make no mistake, this is not emotional maturity. This is not reflection. This is control. Silence is used not to heal, but to dominate, to freeze you out until you fold, and the longer you tolerate it, the more power it holds, until you find yourself dancing around silence, begging to be heard, forgetting that your voice ever mattered in the first place.